My husband lied, cheated, and stole our future savings to chase a dream with another woman. Now I'm rebuilding alone while he begs from the ruins. I, a 28-year-old female, need to start with some history. I met Andrew, a 30-year-old male, during our sophomore year of college. I was immediately taken to him because of his ambitious personality and clear aspirations. We were both business majors. I concentrated on finance, whereas he focused on general business administration. We began dating after being partnered together for a group project, and everything simply fit. Despite the fact that we were broke college students, our dates were always memorable because Andrew would prepare delicious meals in his tiny apartment kitchen. He learned to cook from his grandmother, who raised him after his parents were killed in a car accident when he was 12. Cooking was his way of keeping her memory alive, which I always found quite moving. Following graduation, we both got wonderful jobs. I began at a mid-sized investment firm, while Andrew landed a position at one of our city's leading financial institutions. We moved in together, married 4 years later, and everything seemed ideal. Andrew was swiftly moving up the business ladder. He possessed a natural aptitude for analysis and customer interactions. Within 5 years, he was promoted to senior financial analyst, earning more than $150,000 per year. I was doing well too, having shifted to a better firm 2 years earlier at Andrew's suggestion. Throughout these years, cooking remained Andrew's passion. He would spend entire weekends meal preparation and trying out new recipes. Everyone enjoyed his food, so our apartment became the unofficial gathering place for our social group. He would throw elaborate dinner parties, with each course telling a tale. I recall one celebration where he prepared a 7-course meal based on our favorite trip experiences together. It was his method of being creative while keeping his corporate job. The transition began roughly 4 months ago. Andrew started talking more about feeling unfulfilled at work. He would return home weary, spending hours watching cooking shows and reading chef biographies. I observed he was losing interest in his career, but I figured it was a phase. Then, 3 months ago, he sat me down for what he described as a life-changing chat. He had been covertly looking into cooking schools and discovered one that offered a rigorous 18-month program. The school has an excellent reputation and has produced several renowned chefs. He outlined his entire strategy: quit his job, finish the school, work in other restaurants to gather expertise, and finally open his own. He had charts, deadlines, and even potential restaurant ideas planned out. The hitch was that the program would cost us virtually all of our savings, which amounted to approximately $65,000. This comprised tuition, materials, and basic living expenses throughout the program. We would have to live solely on my pay, which is enough but much lower than our combined income. Andrew calculated that with a few lifestyle changes we could make it work. I was startled but attempted to be supportive. After all, he had always supported my professional endeavors. When I wanted to change jobs 2 years ago, despite the initial income drop, he advised me to think long-term. We spent weeks discussing the advantages and disadvantages. I inquired about part-time options, but he emphasized that the rigorous program would provide the finest foundation. We reviewed our finances several times, established thorough budgets, and devised a plan. Everything seemed manageable on paper, so I agreed. The first month was really thrilling. Andrew was like a kid in a candy store, coming home every day with stories about different cooking methods and demonstrating his knife abilities. He would practice his lessons at home, and although the results were not always great, his zeal was contagious. I wondered if this was exactly what he needed. But things began to change during the second month. The program is really difficult. He departs around 6 a.m., and frequently does not return until 8 p.m. or later. The physical demands of standing all day, along with the stress of learning everything from scratch, have taken their toll on him. He is frequently fatigued and grumpy, and, worst of all, he has lost pleasure in cooking at home. This final bit truly worries me. Our weekends used to be filled with the aroma of his cooking and the sound of people laughing around our dining table. Now, when I suggest inviting guests over, he says he is too sleepy. When I inquire what he wants for supper, he usually chooses takeaway or something basic, such as pasta. The passionate cook who used to spend hours preparing a sauce now has barely enough energy to reheat leftovers. The financial strain is beginning to show. We had to cancel our planned trip to Europe, which we had been saving for more than a year. We have cut all non-essential spending. I've started taking on extra assignments at work to compensate for the decreased revenue. We are not in grave straits, but the comfort and security we have fought so hard to achieve are slipping away. Last week I learned something that seriously undermined my trust. While organizing our home office, I came across paperwork for a $20,000 personal loan that Andrew had taken out without my knowledge. When I approached him, he explained that it was for crucial equipment and additional workshops that were not included in the original program fee. He said that these things would give him an advantage in the industry. I was infuriated. We had always been open about our finances, so this felt like a major betrayal of trust. Every time I try to express my concerns, Andrew becomes defensive. He reminds me that I agreed to the modification and accuses me of not believing him. He is continually talking about his future restaurant ambitions, but all I can think about is our depleted savings and increasing stress. Yesterday he suggested wanting to expand his curriculum by taking some additional classes, which would need more time and money. I'm beginning to see that perhaps I was naive in believing that this change would be smooth. The Andrew I originally met was structured, responsible, and always considered our collaboration while making decisions. This new Andrew appears eager to give up our financial security and relationship stability for his goal. While I admire his boldness in pursuing his passion, I am concerned that he is being impetuous and unrealistic. I care greatly about him and want him to be happy, but I'm beginning to regret backing this decision. Our comfortable, steady life has been flipped upside down, and I'm not sure whether it's worth it. I sometimes find myself resenting him for choosing this road, and then I feel horrible about it. I'm not sure whether I'm being selfish or practical. Should I continue to support this desire, or is it time to have a real discussion about returning to his corporate job? Edit to add, many of you have suggested that I give it more time as it has just been 3 months. You're probably correct. I suppose my unexpected lifestyle change and financial hardship are causing me to panic. I'll attempt to be more patient and sympathetic while keeping track of our finances. Update 1. I'd want to thank everyone who responded to my first post. Many of you suggested that I was making hasty decisions and that I should give Andrew more time to acclimate to this big life upheaval. Your thoughts made me think about my reaction, and I determined to work harder to grasp his new reality. Last week, I organized an unexpected visit to his culinary school during their lunch break. I bought food from his favorite deli, where we had our first date in college, thinking it would be a good way to express my support. When I got at school, the scene I stepped into altered everything. I found the classroom space easy enough, but Andrew was not present. A student guided me to one of the practice kitchens, stating that he frequently spent extra time there. When I walked in, I noticed Andrew with a young woman who I later learned was Julia, 25 female. They were standing quite close together at a kitchen station, and he was guiding her hands while teaching her some cutting technique. What struck me was how calm and joyful he appeared, in stark contrast to the exhausted, irritated guy I see at home. When they observed me, Andrew appeared frightened and nearly sprang away from Julia. He swiftly introduced us, and Julia was too nice, which instantly raised alarms in my mind. She kept caressing Andrew's arm while talking and making inside jokes I didn't get. She noted Andrew's natural teaching skills and how fortunate she was to have him as a practice partner. But what caught me off guard was her casual reference of their weekend study sessions at her flat. According to her, they have been meeting on a regular basis to practice recipes and procedures. This was new to me. Andrew told me he was practicing at school on those weekends. When I looked at him, he was staring at the floor and refused to meet my gaze. The drive home that evening was tense. When I eventually mentioned Julia and the weekend study sessions, Andrew became protective in a way I hadn't seen before. He accused me of spying on him, claiming Julia was simply a committed student who needed more assistance. When I pointed out that he had lied about where he spent his weekends, he turned the tables on me. He stated that my criticism about his career choice was driving him away, and that he needed to spend time with people who genuinely supported his goals. That disagreement prompted me to do something I should have done weeks earlier. I reviewed our credit card statements in detail. What I discovered made my stomach flip. There were many charges from high-end restaurants and pubs, all on weekends while he was meant to be studying at school. Some charges came from all around town, not near the school or Julia's flat. When I provided him with the proof, his tale altered. Suddenly these visits were about networking and seeing different restaurant environments. He argued that it was vital for knowing the sector and making contacts. When I reminded him of our restricted budget and how we had to cancel our own dinner outings owing to financial constraints, he erupted. "You just don't get it," he exclaimed. "This isn't about money, it's about learning and growing in my craft. You are attempting to control every aspect of my new life because you are jealous that I am finally doing something I enjoy." He stormed off and spent the next 2 days at his brother's house. During those 2 days his brother Jason phoned me. Jason and I have always had a positive relationship. He was even my confidant in the early days when Andrew was arranging his proposal. However, this talk was different. Jason accused me of being dictatorial and stifling Andrew's inventiveness. According to him, Andrew was crying on the phone, stating he felt confined and misunderstood. This did not sound like the Andrew I knew at all. Andrew returned home after 2 days, pretending as if nothing had happened. He even gave me flowers and apologized for overreacting. However, something still felt odd. The next day, when washing laundry, I discovered a little notebook in the pocket of his chef coat. I realized I shouldn't have looked, but after everything that had happened, I needed to know the truth. The notebook began innocently enough, with recipes and cooking notes, but as I read on, I discovered personal entries that made my heart sink. There were parts about feeling trapped in our marriage, and how Julia ignites something inside him. He wrote on how she sees him as an artist, rather than a provider, and how she understands his spirit as no one else ever has. There was also a list of advantages and cons for various life decisions, including one labeled, "Starting Fresh." I returned the notebook precisely where I found it and have not mentioned anything. How can I? The Andrew who authored those remarks is unknown to me. The man I married would never lie about how he spent his time and money. He would never hide his emotions in a hidden journal instead of communicating with me. He would never allow someone else to come between us. I've started discreetly preparing for whatever may happen next. I opened a separate bank account and transferred some of my salary there. I've documented everything, the lies, the hidden costs, and the instances when he went missing. I've even photographed the credit card statements, but I feel terrible about being so skeptical of my own husband. I'm not sure what to do next. Part of me wants to confront him about everything, the notepad, the lies, Julia. But another half is afraid of what the conversation will disclose. Is he truly following his ambitions, or is he utilizing this professional change to flee our marriage? Would revealing what I know push him away or finally get him to be honest with me? For the time being, I'm just observing and waiting, feeling like a stranger in my own marriage. The saddest part is that I still adore him, and I find myself hoping that this is just a period caused by stress and huge life changes. But deep down, I'm starting to wonder if our marriage will be another casualty of this dream. Update 2. Last week, the truth finally hit me, and it was worse than I could have imagined. It began with an email from an address I didn't know, with the subject line, "Your husband and my girlfriend." The sender was Julia's 3-year boyfriend, Eric. Eric sent a detailed and damning email. He discovered the affair after discovering Julia's phone unlocked while she was showering. He discovered months of messages between her and Andrew, stretching back practically to the start of the culinary program. He sent me screenshots of their talks, claiming, "I deserve to know the truth just like he did." Reading through those texts seemed like watching a train wreck in slow motion. It began innocently enough with discussions about recipes and processes, but quickly shifted to personal exchanges. Andrew grumbled to her that I was too concentrated on the practical aspects of life and did not comprehend his artistic spirit. They mocked me as the banker in their communications, joking about how foolish I was to see what was going on right in front of me. The communications revealed that their study sessions were primarily held at high-end restaurants, with Andrew spending hundreds of dollars on tasting menus and wine pairings. They rationalized it as research for their prospective business partnership. Yes, you read it correctly. They had planned to operate a restaurant together after graduation. That $20,000 personal loan was used primarily for market research dinners and initial business planning for their prospective cafe. Julia executed her role flawlessly, always feeding Andrew's ego with messages about how wonderful and misunderstood he was. She referred to him as her culinary soulmate and claimed I was preventing him from reaching his full potential. Andrew ate it up, telling her that she was the one person who genuinely understood his enthusiasm. What hurt the most were the messages in which they discussed their future together. They had chosen various locations for their cafe, discussed menu ideas, and even imagined what their lives would be like once they could be together properly. Andrew had written that meeting Julia made him realize he had settled into our marriage. After reading everything, I felt physically ill. I spent the entire day in bed, alternately crying and feeling numb. But suddenly, rage took over. I copied out all of the messages, arranged them on our dining table, the same table where he used to prepare those beautiful dinners for me, and waited for him to return home. When Andrew went in and saw the papers, all the color left his face. His first words were neither, "I'm sorry," nor a denial. Instead, he said, "How did you get these?" Even then his main concern was getting caught, not the suffering he had caused. The talk that ensued was both unpleasant and illuminating. When backed into a corner with proof, Andrew revealed his true colors. He attempted to blame everything on me. My emphasis on financial security had prompted him to seek answers elsewhere. He stated that the stress of his professional transition and my lack of support drove him into Julia's arms. According to him, Julia recognized that in order to attain your goals, you must sometimes take chances and break the rules. When I mentioned the money, Our savings, the loan, and the credit card debt he'd accumulated while whining and feeding her. He had the nerve to justify it as an investment in his future. He attempted to argue that the pricey dinners were required for understanding fine dining culture, and Julia was simply assisting him in navigating that environment. The real kicker came when I inquired about their business plans. They had previously put down a deposit on a potential restaurant space using a portion of their $20,000 loan. They planned to sign the lease next month. Andrew had even drafted his resignation letter from the culinary program, intending to drop out and begin remodeling the apartment with Julia. I told him he should go that night. He attempted to argue, claiming that he could explain everything, that he was confused and worried, and that Julia meant nothing. But when I threatened to contact the cops, he eventually departed. He's been staying with his brother, who, incidentally, called me to apologize sincerely. Apparently, Andrew created a very different picture of our marital issues for his family. The next few days followed a deluge of texts from Andrew, long lines about how sorry he was, how he had lost himself, and how he wanted to make amends. He offered to cut all contact with Julia, drop out of culinary school, and even try to reapply for his old job. He sent mutual acquaintances to plead his cause, had his mother phone me crying, and even came to my office with flowers. Security escorted him out. But I am done. The trust is gone, as is the respect. The man I married, the one who cooked me dinner in his tiny college apartment and dreamed of making a life together, is no longer alive. That dude does not exist anymore. I don't recognize the person in his place. Someone who could lie to my face, take our savings, and plan their future with another woman while lying in our bed. Update 3. I promised this would be my final update, and it feels good to end this chapter of my life. The previous 3 months have been a roller coaster of legal meetings, emotional upheavals, and significant life changes. But I am finally beginning to see light at the end of the tunnel. Divorce proceedings are already started. Following my last update, Andrew's attempts to win me back became increasingly desperate. He showed up at my workplace so frequently that I had to register a complaint with security. He sent handwritten notes about how Julia didn't mean anything to him, how she was only a symptom of his quarter-life crisis, and how leaving his corporate career had briefly driven him insane. He even dropped out of culinary school and urged his former employer to hire him back. They declined. Apparently, word had spread about his abrupt leave and the entire culinary dream catastrophe. The karma train hit hard. Julia, the alleged soulmate who understood his artistic spirit, eventually abandoned both Andrew and Eric in favor of another culinary school classmate. According to mutual friends, she has a history of such behavior. Andrew was her third married man at the school. When Andrew realized he wasn't unique and was just another notch on her belt, he had a complete meltdown. He drunk called me at 2 a.m., crying about how he had destroyed his life for someone who saw him as nothing more than a conquest. The financial fallout has been ugly. Aside from the $20,000 personal loan, I discovered he had created 2 credit cards I was unaware of and maxed them out, primarily on fancy restaurants and gifts for Julia. The overall damage is estimated to be around $45,000. Fortunately, my lawyer is a miracle worker. I'm not liable for any of the debts because they were all in his name and we could prove they were incurred while carrying on the affair. The judge was particularly displeased with the proof that he spent our savings on another woman. I moved out of our apartment and into a smaller place closer to work. It's a change from our huge 2-bedroom to a 1-bedroom home, but it feels like my place. There are no memories here. There are no ghosts from previous dinner parties. I'm gradually restoring my savings while focused on my career. I was actually promoted last month, which feels like the universe's way of telling me I made the correct decision. Some mutual friends believe I should give Andrew another chance. They point out that he has endured enough. He lost his job, goals, reputation, and savings all at once. He's currently working as a line cook at Applebee's, earning little more than the minimum wage. His brother informed me he lives in their parents' basement and can only make the minimal payments on his debt. They claim he's learned his lesson, but I can't go back. The trust has been entirely shattered, and I am not interested in being anyone's consolation prize or safety net. Andrew did not only cheat on me, he lied to me repeatedly, stole from our future, and mocked me in front of his affair partner. He was willing to give up 10 years of marriage for a fantasy that lasted less than 3 months. That cannot be fixed through therapy. The irony of the situation is not lost on me. He left a 6-figure job to pursue his culinary goals, and now he makes burger platters at a chain restaurant. He aspired to be a respected chef with his own restaurant, but at the age of 30, he is still living in his parents' basement. Sometimes I wonder if he believes his artistic energy was worth the cost. As for me, I'm doing better than I anticipated. The divorce should be finalized within a few months. Given the facts, my lawyer believes we may be able to ask Andrew to pay for some of my legal bills. I've started taking cooking classes, partially to regain something he ruined and partly because I can't keep eating takeout forever. My new house has a modest but adequate kitchen, and I'm gradually coming to like cooking for myself. I've had a few people try to set me up on dates, but I'm not ready just yet. I'm focusing on rebuilding my life and rediscovering myself without Andrew. Maybe one day I'll trust enough to love again, but for now, I'm happy with my independence and peace of mind. Sometimes the best form of vengeance is simply to live. My stepdad hid my college acceptances, claimed he was protecting us from debt. But his control backfired. My mom left him and the family chose me. I'm an 18-year-old who thought I got rejected on all of my college applications. By April, every email I received was a rejection. It was devastating. I busted my buttocks in high school and couldn't understand why I didn't get into anything. My stepfather continued encouraging me not to worry, and that community college was a wonderful starting point. He's long argued that community colleges are a better option than universities. I assumed he was trying to make me feel better about the rejections, but it always bothered me how fast he discounted the possibility of me attending a 4-year university. It turns out I wasn't really rejected everywhere. My stepfather intercepted my acceptance letters and emails and only showed me rejections. I had utilized a Gmail account for applications that he had helped me set up. He insisted on keeping the password for emergencies. Little did I know, he went into the settings and created a filter that would automatically delete or hide any emails that appeared to be acceptances. On top of that, he was grabbing physical mail from institutions before I saw it. I never beat him to the mailbox after school, so I didn't think much of it. I hadn't realized he was removing my college letters and storing them in his home office. I only found out about this by chance. A week ago, I received a call on my cell phone from an unfamiliar number. When I answered the phone, it was an admissions officer from one of the universities I had applied to. She said they hadn't heard from me and wanted to know if I was still interested since the deadline to accept my spot had passed a week before. I was like, "Excuse me, what spot?" I nearly assumed it was a prank. She stated that I had been admitted to their university, and they were disappointed I hadn't responded. I informed her I hadn't received any acceptance letters or emails. I thought I had been rejected. She graciously suggested that I check my email spam or junk folders, and that if I was still interested, I might be able to enroll later. After hanging up, I went through my email account. That's when I saw something odd. An email from that college in the trash bin, marked as read. I began looking through the email settings and discovered the filter my stepfather had set up. It was configured to automatically erase emails containing terms such as congratulations, accepted, offer, admission, and so on. There were multiple emails from other colleges that had been discovered. I felt horrible when I realized that all of the rejections I saw could have been the only emails remaining since he had filtered out the acceptances. I wanted more proof, so I decided to look into my stepfather's home office when he was at work. In one of his desk drawers, I discovered a big folder hiding beneath other folders. When I opened it, I literally had to sit down since it included actual college acceptance letters addressed to me. I'm referring to large envelope shipments from at least 4 universities that I applied to, all of which were opened. This man has some nerve. He kept them locked away all along while I was moping around, believing I wasn't good enough to get in anywhere. In a couple letters he'd scribbled notes like "too expensive" or "nope" in ink. I was infuriated and terrified. I took the letters and printouts and confronted him that evening as soon as he returned home. I was quivering with rage, but I attempted to remain calm and simply asked him why he buried my college acceptances. At first he played stupid, saying, "I don't know what you're talking about." So I showed him the stack of letters. His face changed colors in amazement, and he became protective. He truly sighed and said he'd talk to me about them. Yeah, when did all of their deadlines pass? I requested an explanation, and he finally gave it. He didn't want me to go to university because it's too expensive, and he didn't want my mother to spend money on it. I was very furious. First and foremost, I've been working part-time and have saved some money for college. Plus, my mother had saved money for me before she married him. It's not entirely his money. Second, even if money was an issue, what he did, sabotage me, is such a betrayal. I yelled at him, saying he had no right to make this decision for me or my mother. He began roaring back that I should be glad that he is looking out for me and that if I attend community college for 2 years before transferring, I will graduate debt-free. He kept saying that he was doing me a favor by preventing me and my mother from incurring massive debt for a meaningless degree. I told him it was not his decision to make, and burying my acceptance letters was a horrible selfish act. It became heated. He basically urged me to quiet up and not overreact. He told me I needed to be practical and that in our family, we are not going to waste money on a luxury college when community college is available. I was so enraged that I literally saw red. I yelled back that he had ruined my prospects of attending a school I had fought hard to get into. Because of him, the deadline for one school had already gone, and I'm not sure what else I missed. He really rolled his eyes and said, "It's not a big deal. You can start at community college and maybe transfer later. Stop making this a bigger deal than it is." Then he had the nerve to tell me not to inform my mother about anything. He knew she would be devastated if she found out. My mother was out of town visiting my grandparents for a few days. And Dad says, "There's no need to worry your mom about this. She has enough on her mind. We'll talk it out and handle it ourselves." By handle it, he meant I should silently accept his choice, forget about those places, and stick to community college like he intended. I told him straight out that I wasn't going along with it. This was my future, and he'd gone too far. He became very chilly and said something like, "You'd better reconsider making this into a crusade, young lady. Don't make me out to be the bad guy here. I did what I had to do." It sounded menacing, like he was warning me to keep my mouth shut. Right now, I'm stuck at home alone with him till my mother returns in 2 days. I haven't told her yet, but I will as soon as she gets home. I texted her and asked when she'd be back. But I didn't want to surprise her with this while she was visiting my grandparents. She responded, stating she'd be home shortly and asking whether everything was fine. I simply answered, "We'll talk when you get back." I believe she sensed something was wrong since she kept asking if my stepfather and I were getting along. I had to lie and claim we are fine. In actuality, I seldom speak with him, and he acts as if nothing occurred. I'm posting this because I'm extremely annoyed and angry. My stepfather literally attempted to take my future because he did not want to spend money on me. It's quite domineering and deceptive. I can't even get my brain around it completely. I'm not sure what will happen when I tell my mother, but I know it will blow up. She has no idea he did this, and she will be outraged and heartbroken because he kept it from both of us. I also don't know what I can do about the colleges. Did I lose all of my offers? Can I salvage any of this? I feel compelled to try, yet I'm still surprised that anything happened at all. Update 1. So, my mother returned from her trip, and I told her everything. I didn't even wait for her to take off her jacket before blurting it out. I was so desperate for her to know. My mother was devastated and outraged. I've never seen her react like that. First, she was stunned, asking me again, "He did what? Are you absolutely sure?" When I showed her the tangible letters in my palm, her countenance sank. Then she began sobbing and apologizing to me, something I did not expect. She continued screaming, "I'm so sorry, I had no idea, I should have known something was wrong." Her amazement quickly evolved to wrath. I was surprised at how upset she became because my mother is generally a quiet, conflict-avoidant person, but she was furious that he had gone behind our backs and wrecked up my future. She started saying things like, "All those nights we sat with you upset over those rejections, and he knew you weren't rejected. How could he do this to you? How could he do this to us?" It was a lot. Of course, I was irritated as well. But knowing how it broke my mother's heart added another element. She felt deceived both on my behalf and as his wife. He completely broke her confidence as a partner by making such an important decision concerning our life without consulting her. We didn't wait an hour before facing my stepfather jointly. He returned from running errands and discovered us in the living room, and he could tell by our expressions that the jig was up. My mother instantly laid onto him. I have never heard her yell at anyone like that. It was an all-out explosive fight. She screamed at him, wondering how he could hide her daughter's college acceptance letters. My stepfather went right into defense mode. He used the same justifications he offered me, stating he was simply thinking about our budget and trying to keep my mother from wasting money on a large university when community college is just as good. He kept saying that education is too expensive and that we should be careful with our money. That irritated my mother even more. She exclaimed, "Our money? Since when is it just your money? We saved that money for her education." To clarify, my mother has a separate little savings account designated for me. Some of it was money my father, her ex, left for me when he died, and some of it was simply mom's savings over time. My stepfather is aware of this, and I believe he has always disliked the fact that money was set aside for me to attend college. But he has never said it directly. Now, he practically admitted that he didn't want any money, hers, his, or mine, going toward my 4-year education. The argument was really intense. There was a lot of shouting back and forth. My mother described what he did as financially controlling and a tremendous breach of trust. He exclaimed that she was very passionate and not thinking clearly about the costs. At one point, he stated, "If you two would stop and think logically, you'd be thanking me for saving you from a huge financial mistake." That made me turn crimson again. I warned him that no one would ever praise him for being a manipulative liar. My mother backed me up, saying his behavior was terrible and that he had lied to both of us. Things escalated to the point that he began to use the cold, furious tone with me again. He pointed at me and said I was making this a larger problem than it should be. He had the audacity to add, "Kids get rejected from college all the time and survive. You'd have been fine at community college, you still will be if you stop this nonsense." I responded that the problem was that he took away my choice and lied about it. Mom was outraged and told him that this was not his decision to make. He then blatantly threatened me. He went on, "If I keep trying to turn his wife against him, and if I insist on making this into some giant drama, then I could just pack my things and get out of his house." That was correct. He literally threatened to toss me out for calling him out on his nonsense. My mother immediately said, "She's not going anywhere. If anyone should be leaving, it's you for pulling the trick." He grew even louder, shouting over her, "I'm not going anywhere. This is my house. I pay the bills, so I make the rules." It was horrifying at the time. I've never seen him that enraged. I was worried he'd seize my belongings and throw them on the lawn right then and there. My mother informed him that if he didn't calm down, she would call the police, which surprised me. He was like, "Oh, now you're threatening me with police. Unbelievable." He just threw his hands up and rushed out of the home to cool off. He drove off in his car after that, I believe to go away for a while. My mother hugged me and told me I wouldn't be kicked out and that she would sort it out. I could tell she was still digesting the shock, but she completely supported me in front of him, which felt nice. The house is quite tense right now. When he returned later, we largely avoided each other. Nobody apologized, and nothing was actually resolved. It's just the Cold War atmosphere. My mother and I are kind of sticking together, while he is off stewing by himself. He's plainly upset that I told her and that we ganged up on him. He seldom speaks to either of us, except to make snarky remarks like, "Nice of you two to consult me on your big life decisions," when he overhears us discussing college matters. It's awkward as hell. I'm not sure what the next step is. My mother mentioned that she might stay at a friend's house with me for a few days to put some distance between us and him, but I'm not sure if we will. She is concerned about leaving her home in such a state. And honestly, I'm terrified that if we leave, he'll do something weird with my belongings or the funds. Right now, I'm ignoring him and concentrating on damage control in my college position. Update 2. Thank you to everyone who recommended it. I spent the past few days calling every college that appeared to have accepted me to explain the issue and see if they would still uphold my admission or allow late enrollment. It has been crazy, but I have some good news on that front. 3 of the universities I contacted claimed they would still accept me, either in the late fall or spring session. I could not believe it. I honestly thought I was ruined and would have to wait an entire year or so. But I explained what happened, stating simply that I missed the deadline due to a family emergency, mix-up. One of these universities was one of my top picks when I applied. A nearby university. And, get this, they told me I'm still eligible for a half scholarship they provided when I was admitted. The scholarship money had yet to be allocated elsewhere. So, if I enroll in the spring semester, I can still use it. I took a double take on the phone when they mentioned it. It feels like a big relief after all of this stress. The other 2 colleges stated I could attend the forthcoming spring semester as well, but without particular scholarships, but I might still receive some financial assistance. I will have to check. Regardless, I now have options beyond community college, which is a huge relief. I was scared none of these would work out due to missing deadlines, but it appears that at least a few places are sympathetic, or still have room. I believe the person who called me in the first place wanted to fill their class, which is why they reached out, and the fact that I got decent marks and such undoubtedly helped persuade them that I didn't intentionally miss the deadline. While I was performing all of this, my stepfather kept a close eye on me. I attempted to do the majority of it while he was at work or out of the home, but I'm sure he overheard one of my phone calls. He began questioning me about who I was speaking with, and I simply stated that I was speaking with college admissions offices without providing any other information. He seemed irritated that I was still pursuing the university option. After our previous argument, I believe he expected me to simply accept going to community college. There's no possibility, buddy. When he found out that I had been accepted to a university with a scholarship for the spring semester, he went completely crazy. I'm not sure if my mother told him or if he found out for himself. I had told my mother privately about the offers and the scholarship, and she was overjoyed for me as well. We were talking about how to organize things for spring, and he probably caught wind. Next thing I know, there's another massive shouting match going on. This time, my stepfather was enraged. He was yelling at my mother that she was about to make the biggest mistake of her life by allowing me to go to some university and spend all of our money. He effectively issued an ultimatum. She had to choose between supporting me and attending one of these universities or keeping their marriage together. Yes, he actually went there. It is either her or me. He told my mother that if I go to university and she helps me in any way, financially or otherwise, she will choose me over him, which he will not tolerate. What type of adult man engages in a jealous power struggle with an 18-year-old over something like this? He kept ranting that I'm ungrateful, that I'm causing problems in their marriage, and that if she respected him, she'd stick to the original plan, community college. My mother was crying at this point, accusing him of trying to control her and isolate me. She said, "You're my husband, but she's my daughter. Why are you making me choose in the first place? We're supposed to be a family." His response was basically that I'm not his kid. Ouch. And he's not obligated to pay a dime for me, especially not for some fancy college plans. He said I'm almost 19 and an adult, and I can do whatever I want, but not with his money and not under his roof. I stayed out of this specific shouting match as much as I could. I was in the next room, but I could hear everything. My heart was pounding as he basically demanded that my mother stop supporting me. I did go in at one point when he stated I'm not his daughter, and I told him darn right I'm not, because my actual dad would never have pulled the trash you did. It probably wasn't the best idea to add fuel to the fire, but I was so angry. He yelled at me to stay out of it, saying it was between him and my mother. I yelled back that it involved me, so I am in it. Mom tried to get me to go to my room. I eventually did, just to end the three-way yelling. I sat in my room listening to the rest. He kept at my mom, basically saying she's a bad wife if she sides with me. I heard him say something like, "If you do this, don't expect this marriage to continue." I refuse to be disrespected like this. My mom was sobbing and saying, "Why are you doing this? You lied to us, and now you want me to just turn my back on my daughter's dreams? You're insane." She also said something about, "How can you talk about respect when you went behind my back and destroyed something so important?" It went on for what felt like forever. Eventually things went quiet, and I heard a door slam. I'm pretty sure my stepdad slept on the couch, or at least in the guest room that night, because he didn't come to their bedroom. The next morning, I found my mom in the kitchen looking exhausted. She basically told me, "If he's forcing me to choose, I'll choose you. He can't call himself my husband and treat my child this way." I gave her the biggest hug and started crying because I was half afraid she would choose him. Their 5-year marriage versus me, who will hopefully be moving out soon for college. It was a crazy thought, but he had me paranoid. She told me that she was not abandoning me, and that she was sorry it had come to this. I could tell she was upset that her marriage was dissolving, but she was also adamant, saying, "We'll work out the money. I don't care what he says. I'm not letting you miss out on this opportunity." That was the first time in this whole ordeal I felt like things might actually turn out okay for me. Minus the whole family drama, of course. My stepdad didn't speak to either of us that morning. He left for work without a word. Honestly, at this stage I was staying as far away from him as possible. Anyway, I spent the day at the library using their Wi-Fi to handle some university stuff because I didn't want to do it at home where he might snoop. I also started quietly packing some of my important belongings in case things went south quickly. Update 3. A lot has happened. My mom, who has always been kind of passive and conflict avoidant, finally grew a spine. She did something I honestly didn't think she would ever do. She went and opened her own bank account and moved a chunk of money into it to pay for my tuition and living expenses for school. This is huge because my stepdad has controlled all the household finances for years. To explain, when they got married, he convinced her to merge accounts and let him manage everything since he's good with money. And to be fair, he makes more money than her. He's the primary earner. She has a part-time job. But it went from, "I'll handle the bills," to him having to approve every expense. He gave Mom a household budget and basically monitored what she spent. He even cut up one of her personal credit cards a couple years back, saying she didn't need it since they had a joint card. Yeah, real controlling behavior that, in hindsight, was a bunch of red flags. She never stood up to that until now. After the ultimatum and seeing how far he'd go to control my future, something in her snapped. Without telling my stepdad, Mom withdrew a significant amount of money from their joint account, money that originated from her savings and my college fund, and deposited it in a new account only she has access to. This was effectively to make sure she could pay for my college directly with or without his permission. She also retrieved some important documents, birth certificates, etc., and stashed them safely, anticipating a possible separation. I only found out she did all this after the fact. She told me once it was done, and I was honestly so proud of her. It was like, finally, she's not letting him micromanage her or me. Well, when my stepdad discovered what she did, he retaliated in the pettiest and cruelest ways. First, he somehow got alerts or noticed the large withdrawal transfer. Of course he did. He likely checks the accounts daily. That same day, I found out our home Wi-Fi suddenly had a new password. He changed all the Wi-Fi passwords and likely even the admin settings, so I couldn't use the internet at home anymore. It was clearly aimed at me, because my mom has mobile data and didn't notice the Wi-Fi change until I told her I couldn't connect. He didn't even bother giving her the new password either, so maybe he wanted to spite both of us. Along with that, I got a lovely surprise when my phone stopped working. My stepdad removed my number from the family phone plan, basically cutting off my cell service. I'm pretty sure he did that out of pure spite to make it harder for me to communicate with anyone or call colleges, etc. Luckily, my phone itself isn't tied to him. As soon as I realized what happened and informed my mom, she gave me one of her SIMs. She was outraged and promised to get my phone set up on her own plan ASAP. But it's just the level of vindictiveness. Like, who does that to their family? Cut off the internet and phone of an 18-year-old just to assert power. The worst part, he actually followed through on kicking me out of the house. After he realized my mom was moving money and likely planning to support me regardless of what he said, he went ballistic. He told me I was officially not welcome under his roof since I'm determined to disrespect him and bleed them dry. It was an extremely unpleasant discussion. Basically, he aggressively told me, "Pack your junk and go out. Go live off your mother's pay elsewhere." My mom was at work when this blow-up happened, so it was just me and him. I didn't engage much. I just said, "Fine. I don't want to live here with you either." I was done trying to reason with this man. I grabbed as much of my stuff as I could in a couple suitcases and backpacks. I called my mom and let her know what was happening. She was terrified and told me to go straight to my aunt's house, my mom's older sister, and wait there. My aunt is an absolute saint. She showed up with her car within an hour to pick me up. By the time she got to our house, I was already outside with my bags because I didn't feel safe or comfortable staying inside with him any longer than necessary. He was sulking in his office, probably thinking he'd won or something by booting me. My aunt didn't even go inside, she just honked. I'm pretty sure he saw or heard and just didn't care. Or maybe he was relieved I was actually leaving. So yeah, I'm staying at my aunt's house now. She welcomed me with open arms, no questions asked. Apparently my mom had given her a heads up about the situation. My mom had been confiding in her after the first fight when things got really bad. My aunt told me I can stay as long as I need and that she's proud of me for standing up to my stepdad's nonsense. She also said something like, "Don't worry, we're not going to let him get away with this." I was still pretty upset and shell-shocked, but hearing that was reassuring. My mom didn't come with me to my aunt's, at least not yet. She stayed in the house with him for the time being, most likely to figure out her next steps and because she's not the type to leave her home easily. I think she wanted me out of there for my safety and sanity, but she's being strategic about her own exit. There are financial and legal things she's probably considering. We've been in constant contact though. Once I got to aunt's and got on Wi-Fi, I updated her. Now she's got me a cheap temporary phone plan of my own too. She told me not to worry and that this is not the end of my college plans. She's already paid the deposit for the spring semester at the university I chose, the one with the partial scholarship. She managed to do that before my stepdad possibly locks down the money. So the important stuff is secured. Meanwhile, the situation between my mom and stepdad is at a breaking point. They basically aren't talking unless they absolutely have to. She told me he's been alternating between angry, sulking, and trying to act like I'm the source of all their problems. He's mad that I turned her against him. Mom told me that last night he actually tried to apologize to her for the fighting. Not for what he did to me, mind you, but for the fact that they've been fighting, and he suggested that if I just apologized and agreed to forget about the university, I could move back home and things would go back to normal. She told him that there is no normal to go back to after what he did, and she said she's done tolerating his control. According to her, that made him switch back to anger quickly, and he accused her of valuing some bratty kid's whims over their marriage. I'm safe at my aunt's house, and my college future is back on track. It's unfortunate that this has happened in my family, but I'm also relieved to be out of that toxic house. Mom is now consulting with a lawyer, which one of my uncles assisted in arranging. More on that in the next update. I've been working extra hours at my part-time job for the fall and saving up so I have a cushion when I start school. My aunt refuses to take any rent or anything from me while I'm here, saying, "Focus on school and getting out of this mess." I'm so thankful for the support system on my mother's side of the family. My stepfather's last-ditch attempt to manipulate the situation backfired spectacularly. He apparently thought he could rally the extended family to his side by painting me as an ungrateful, entitled brat, and my mother as someone who is being duped by me, so this will most likely be my final update. My stepfather went into damage control mode after I moved to my aunt's house, and my mother openly planned to leave him. I believe he realized he was losing control and that people would eventually hear that his wife and stepdaughter had moved out, or kicked out in my case. So he contacted a bunch of our extended family, mostly on my mom's side, her siblings, and even some of her cousins who were close too. He tried to get ahead of the story by calling them and even writing this email detailing his version of events. I'm sure he thought he could make me look like the villain. I've seen the email he sent. One of my uncles emailed it to me. They're all on my side. It's a wild ride. In the email, my stepfather claims that I've become entitled and indoctrinated by the prospect of attending an expensive institution and that I've turned my mother against him to get my way. He actually wrote that I threw a tantrum after not getting into some schools and manipulated my mother into spending a ridiculous amount of money to indulge my dreams. Here's the best part. While trying to defend himself, he accidentally admitted what he did, writing, "I might have intercepted 1 or 2 college letters because I knew how much disappointment they would cause her if she got into a school we couldn't afford." There it is. He basically blurted out that he intercepted my mail, trying to frame it as if he was protecting me from disappointment. That's a completely twisted justification, and he should never have put it in writing, because intercepting mail that isn't addressed to you is a federal offense. 2 of my uncles, my mother's brothers, are lawyers, and when they saw that line, their jaws dropped. One of them literally responded to the email, pointing out in polite lawyer speak that my stepfather had just admitted to federal mail tampering and that he should be very careful what he says next. The uncle also coldly stated that his actions toward me were deceitful and potentially actionable. When my stepfather sent that email, I doubt he expected to be effectively threatened with legal action by his own in-laws, but that's what he got. According to what I hear, a bunch of family members basically blasted him after that. My aunt, the one I'm staying with, called him up and reportedly chewed him out thoroughly. I wasn't on the call, but she told me she gave him a piece of her mind for abusing my mother's trust and my future. My grandparents, mom's parents, are also furious with him, and no one in the family is on his side, especially after learning the full truth. In fact, his email did the opposite of what he intended, alerting everyone to how scheming and dishonest he has been. If he was hoping to put pressure on my mother by turning family against us, that plan imploded. My mother has officially filed for legal separation, which is the first step toward divorce in this country. She moved out of the house last week and is currently staying with my grandparents. She didn't want to stay under the same roof with him any longer, especially since we have family support. She took whatever personal belongings and important documents she could, and she's getting a good lawyer with the help of my uncle. My stepfather was served with the separation papers, and when he received them, he was enraged and in disbelief, pleading with her not to end their marriage over a disagreement about a bratty child. She told him it was too late, and he was the one who ended it by lying and betraying his family. I'm very proud of her for finally standing up for herself and me. It's not easy. I know she's been sad over the end of her marriage, but she keeps saying she feels relief now that she's made the decision. There's no more waffling. I'm doing okay, all things considered. I've officially enrolled in the university for the spring semester, attended a short orientation for spring admits, and signed up for classes. I was worried that all of this family drama would derail my college plans again, but my mother and I made sure that didn't happen. I'll be starting university next month, and I'm both excited and nervous. After everything that happened, it feels a little surreal that I'm actually going. We haven't decided what to do, if anything, about the whole mail tampering crime. My uncle said we could report it, but my mom is hesitant to drag this into a criminal case unless absolutely necessary. It could be used as leverage in the divorce to get him to agree to terms favorable to my mother, such as not contesting certain things. I don't really care as long as I'm away from him and he can't mess with my life anymore. Right now he's keeping a low profile after basically everyone pointed out how badly he screwed up. I wouldn't be surprised if he eventually tries to slink back and apologize when he realizes the legal separation is real, but that won't help anything. My mom joked I was proof birth control wasn't perfect, so I walked away. 6 years later, broke parents begged me for help, unaware I owned their house. 6 years of stored-up emotions had that effect. I was always aware that I was not the best-behaved member of my family. My brother Hugo was the intended one with outstanding grades and a varsity jacket, the entire package. I was, according to my mother's dinner party jokes, what happens when you trust cheap pharmacy brand condoms. It's hilarious, right? She'd been making that joke since I was about 8. Growing up, I assumed it was common for your mother to use you as the punchline. But you adapt. I learned the skill to smile through the barbs, like an emotional callus. When people asked what I wanted to be when I grew up, I said a tax write-off, because that's what my father called me after 3 beers. People believed I was a witty kid. Nah, I was only repeating household material. The night things changed was my mother's birthday meal, not the family supper. It was only the 4 of us at a mid-tier restaurant, and Dad moaned about the prices while ordering his 4th scotch. The main incident occurred 2 days later, when my mother invited her work colleagues around. These were not just any. My mother had been anxiously trying to join this country club crowd for years. Our house wasn't elegant, but Mom went Pinterest crazy for this supper. New placemats, candles, and the good tableware that would typically accumulate dust. Dad was ordered to wear his one acceptable button-up and, for the love of God, not drink more than 5. Hugo received the be impressive talk. I received nothing. That should have been my first indication, not even a please don't embarrass me. The night began with me playing server so Robert could be useful for once. I passed around appetizers while Mom told us about Hugo's baseball scholarship prospects. Dad managed to hold it together for the first hour, nursing his beverages and nodding at acceptable intervals. I was invisible, which was the best-case scenario in these scenarios. Then someone inquired about family planning, or something. Some lady with one of those I want to speak with the manager haircuts mentioned how costly kids are these days. That's when it occurred. My mother, 4 glasses of white wine deep, gave me this expression I knew all too well. The, "I've got a real zinger" expression. She pointed directly at me as I gathered empty cups. Birth control is only 99% effective. She paused for emphasis. He's the 1%. Everyone chuckled. Even my father, who typically just exists in these situations, broke out a belly laugh like it was the funniest thing he'd ever heard. I stood there, clutching soiled glasses, as everyone laughed at the fact that I was never intended to exist. Hugo was not laughing. He stared at his plate, as if he wished to disappear. At least one person in that room had the dignity to feel embarrassment. The hardest part was that my mother wasn't done yet. "We already had our perfect kid," she said, indicating to Hugo. "Robert, here's what we call the family mistake." More laughs. Someone, I believe it was my father's supervisor, exclaimed, "Ouch. Bet that's going to leave a mark." As if we were in a bad sitcom. I did not chuck the glasses. I did not yell. I simply placed them carefully on the table and headed upstairs to my room. Nobody noticed. The topic had already shifted to someone's vacation in Cancun. I sat on my bed, and something inside me simply clicked off. Like when you shut down a computer that has been running too many apps. The emotive screen turned blue, then black. I knew I was going to leave that night. I emptied my school backpack of textbooks. Who needs trigonometry when you're about to become homeless, right? I packed the essentials: a couple of t-shirts, jeans, underwear, a toothbrush, the $40 birthday money from my grandmother that I'd been saving for a new game, my phone charger, and the emergency Cliff Bars I kept in case my father forgot to go food shopping. Hugo showed up as I was packing. We did not say much. He knew. He probably saw this coming before I did. He gave me $120 from his own savings and his old phone, which still worked but was not tied to the family plan. He said he'd load $20 in prepaid minutes on it the next day. "They won't even notice you're gone until tomorrow afternoon," he told me. Not accusatory, but factual, as if he were giving me the weather report for my trip. I almost broke down, unloaded everything, and climbed into bed to face another day as the family punchline. But then I heard more laughter downstairs and my mother's voice carrying up, something about adolescent attitude issues. Nope. I was finished. I waited until midnight, when the house was silent. Mom and Dad had passed to sleep after drinking their individual bottles of wine and whiskey. Hugo left his desk light on, our old signal from when we were youngsters, while one of us sneaked into the kitchen for goodies. It's all clear. I did not leave a note. What was I about to say? Thanks for making me feel like a cancerous growth on your perfect family for 16 years? The night was frigid. Late October vibes. I had nowhere to go, yet it felt better than staying. I strolled till I reached the 24-hour McDonald's and used their Wi-Fi to plan my next move. We ended up taking a Greyhound to the next city over. Not too far, but enough. The first week was hard. I slept 2 nights at the bus terminal. I then found a youth refuge. They let me remain for 2 weeks while I got a job washing dishes at a shady cafe that didn't mind that I was underage. All that mattered was that the payment was made in cash. Hugo communicated with us using a disposable email address that we set up. He claimed that when my mother reported me missing, she cried for the cameras. Then she grumbled about how dramatic I was every time the cops departed. Dad got drunk and promised I'd come back when I was hungry enough. I was not going back. Not when hunger made my stomach twist into knots. Not when I stayed at a shelter full of people yelling in their sleep. Not when December arrived and I still didn't have a suitable coat. 2 months in, I met Jack. He caught me asleep in the diner's break room while I was supposed to be doing dishes. Rather than firing me, he inquired as to why I was absent from school. I ended up telling him everything over cold fries after we closed. It turned out that Jack made his own family error, different details, same taste of garbage. He arranged for me to work on repair projects, initially under the table, then legally once I received my GED at the age of 17. Even allowed me to stay on his couch until I could afford the world's most miserable studio apartment. Those first 2 years were a jumble of 12-hour days, instant ramen, and falling asleep to YouTube tutorials about taxes and credit scores while using free Wi-Fi. No social life since who had time? Just work, save, and survive. Hugo graduated and attended college 3 states away. That was a smart move. We still emailed, but less frequently. He was living his life, but I was starting from scratch. Year 3, I began to feel almost human again. I had my own place with no obvious mold. I started taking community college classes online. Even went on a few Tinder dates that weren't total catastrophes. My parents understood I wasn't coming back around month 5. I filed a missing person report, but it went nowhere because I was working and paying expenses under my legal name. They just weren't working hard enough to uncover the error. Hugo informed me that they had converted my room into a home gym by my 17th birthday. Dad received my baseball card collection, which was actually worth something. Mom informed the neighbors I was attending a special boarding school for troublesome kids. That's when I realized it wasn't just about leaving anymore. This was about becoming someone they'd regret losing. Someone who would make them realize what they'd wasted. I stopped being furious all the time. Anger burns the calories you need for climbing. Instead, I became cold and calculated, viewing money not only as a means of existence, but also as a source of power. Every payment, every A in my online programs, and every new skill I learned added another brick to the wall between me and that dinner table where I stood holding unclean glasses while everyone laughed. It has been 6 years now. I'm 22. I have my own home, my own life, and my own hand-picked group of people that truly care. Hugo is the only person who knows where I am. And he was sworn to secrecy, at least until last week, when he called to warn me that our parents are hunting for something. The Bank of Karma is finally calling in their debt. And me? They had no idea I'd be the collections agent. The interest on emotional debt compounded daily. Update. First and foremost, holy shit. I didn't anticipate the first portion to blow up like that. RIP. Inbox. Thank you for all of the prizes and confirming that I'm not the weird one in this narrative. For anyone wondering if this is real, the answer is unfortunately yes. Some details change for obvious reasons, but the main story remains my life. I wish it wasn't. Alright, I'll pick up where I left off. The first 2 years after leaving were primarily survival mode. Working extra shifts, eating cheap ramen, and sleeping on a mattress I found near the dumpster. Don't be judgmental. I thoroughly cleaned it with Lysol. I'd check my email at the public library, and Hugo would give me an update on the home situation. Mom and Dad apparently searched for me for 3 weeks, and by looking, I mean Mom posted a couple of dramatic Facebook updates with my school photo, eliciting her daily dose of compassion replies. Dad called 2 of my schoolmates. This was the extent of their hunt for their missing child. Hugo texted me a screenshot of my mother's Facebook post proclaiming that they had renovated my bedroom into her dream home gym, complete with a Peloton imitation and those decorative weights that no one ever uses. Caption: making lemonade from life's lemons. Blessed Chocker Fit Mom. That post had more engagement than the ones bemoaning my absence. Let that sink in. By year 3, I had saved enough for community college classes. Not the fancy in-person sort, but the inexpensive online ones you do after a long day at work. My back suffered from hunching over a laptop on my kitchen counter, which is also a door between 2 milk crates. But the ache felt different. Pain has a purpose. I studied business and finance. Not because I was interested in spreadsheets, but because I was learning that money is just math, and math doesn't care whether you're desired or not. That's when I met Clara through an online study group. She contacted me privately after I adjusted her Excel formula for a collaborative project. We began video chatting about tasks, and then moved on to other topics. She was as brilliant as heck, studying for her paralegal certification while working at a law firm. The first time we met in person was at this dismal coffee shop halfway between our apartments. I was anxious as hell, wearing my one decent shirt, which still had a small pasta sauce stain that I had tried to disguise with a pen. She arrived with her hair in a sloppy bun, spectacles, and a smile that made me forget about being the family mistake for the entire 3 hours. I told her everything that night. I expected her to run. Instead, she received a colder expression rather than one of pity. She told me about her own poisonous mother, who used her as an emotional punching bag. We were the same type of destruction, just in various flavors. Clara altered my outlook. I saw survival, but she saw opportunity. While we ate takeaway on my floor, she'd point to property listings and say things like, "That building's value is all wrong based on the neighborhood growth pattern." Hugo, on the other hand, kept me up to date on the home front. Dad's drinking had worsened when he was laid off. Mom's social advancement came to an end when her affluent friends learned she couldn't afford to keep up. Their credit card debt was building up. They had refinanced the home twice. Hugo graduated and relocated to pursue a career. Smart youngster. He was the only person who knew what city I lived in, but not my precise address. We had an emergency system. If he ever texted "blue waffle," an old nasty internet joke between us, it indicated our parents knew where I was. Year 4 was when I began to make actual improvement. I got promoted twice at work. I moved to an apartment where my neighbors did not yell at 3 a.m. I started developing credit with a secured card. Small successes felt huge. I developed an obsession with personal finance subreddits and YouTube channels. We learned about investment accounts, compound interest, and credit development. Every dime I saved seemed like another brick in the wall that kept me from ever needing my parents again. Clara moved in with me at the beginning of year 5. Our house wasn't extravagant, just a one-bedroom with working appliances and a shower that didn't unexpectedly turn cold. But it was ours. We'd sit on our secondhand couch, eating cheap stir-fry, and plan our money the way some couples plan weddings. Hugo set off the first explosive. He called instead of texting, which immediately triggered alarms. Dad had lost the house. Not immediately. They were in pre-foreclosure, but the bank was approaching. Years of refinancing, late payments, and Dad's entrepreneurial aspirations had finally caught up with them. They had 90 days before eviction, and then they remembered they had another son. Mom started sharing old baby photos of me on Facebook. "Missing my baby boy every day. Please share to help us find Robert. Tr's missing son, Tracker come home." These are the same photos she couldn't be bothered to upload when I went lost. The remarks were pure gold. "I thought he was at boarding school. Didn't you say he joined the military?" My personal favorite is, "Isn't that the room you turned into your gym?" Dad supposedly joined certain Facebook groups for parents of estranged children. He began portraying himself as a distraught parent, desperate to reconnect. Hugo claimed to have been sober for around 3 weeks before going back into drinking. I saw all of this from afar, following Hugo's posts and spying on their social media accounts. Something chilly was developing within me, not just fury, but something more deliberate. Clara noticed. We'd be eating supper and she'd notice me staring at nothing, running numbers through my head. She didn't try to talk me out of my plans. Instead, she helped improve it. I'd been saving and investing actively, living below my means and developing a portfolio. Not much money, but enough to make some moves. Clara used her paralegal experience to help me comprehend the legal aspects. That's when we devised the plan. I called the bank that handled my parents' mortgage, assumed a false name, formed an LLC, indicated that I was interested in purchasing distressed properties in that area, and made a bid on their specific loan. Banks don't care who buys their debt as long as they are paid. After 3 weeks and a mountain of paperwork, I owned my parents' mortgage. They hadn't realized it, but they suddenly owed me money for the roof over their heads. I did not foreclose immediately. I wanted to wait until they found me and begged for help, unaware that I held their financial future in my hands. Clara labeled it poetic justice. I termed it balancing the ledger. Meanwhile, Mom's desperate social media crusade to find me gained traction. Some local Facebook groups in their area shared her posts. People enjoy hearing a nice family reunion story, especially when they don't know the reality. The mistake occurred 6 months ago. Hugo was visiting us for the weekend. He shared an Instagram story of us at a local restaurant with a distinctive painting in the background that screamed our city. He removed it after 10 minutes, but Mother had already seen it. The texts began pouring in. Hugo gave me his phone, which contained 27 unread texts from Mom. All variations of, "Is that Robert?" and "Where are you?" Hugo sent the blue waffle emergency SMS that night. We laughed it off. What were the possibilities that they'd discover me in a metropolis of 2 million people based on a single mural? When you're desperate, it appears to be quite effective. Hugo called 2 weeks ago to say that Mom had joined every Facebook group in our city. I posted my high school photo everywhere, with the caption, "Looking for my son," and some sob story about how we were cruelly separated. Then, last week, my neighbor across the hall remarked that someone had been inquiring about me. They showed me a screenshot. My mother had somehow discovered our apartment complex's community page and was messaging residents. I changed our locks that day. Part of me wanted to run away and start over somewhere else, but Clara reminded me that I now own their house. I had all the cards. Perhaps it was time to play them. 3 days ago it occurred. I was working from home when the buzzer sounded. I checked the security camera footage on my phone. Thank God for affordable smart home technology. There they were. Mom and Dad were there at my door, looking much older and desperate than I remembered. Dad had lost weight. Mom had acquired it. Both appeared to have been awake for days. Dad shifted from foot to foot, as if he needed a drink. Mom clutched her purse as if it held her last bit of dignity. I didn't respond. I watched them press the buzzer 3 more times. They eventually left a handwritten message imploring me to contact them for an urgent family situation. Hugo called that night to confirm what I already knew. They were coming to discuss the house. They needed money. They needed their heir to help them out. I spent the next 2 days preparing with Clara, gathering documents and practicing what I'd say, how I'd be cool, and how I wouldn't give them the joy of seeing the hurt child they'd abandoned. Yesterday morning, the buzzer sounded again. The camera shows the same anxious faces. This time, I woke them up. 6 years of silence were about to break, and they had no idea what awaited them outside my door. They chuckled at the mistake because he now owned their home. And memories are not the only debts that accrue interest. Final update. My hands shook as I buzzed them up. Not from terror, but rather from consuming 3 energy drinks on an empty stomach. That strange electric sensation where your body can't tell whether it's excited or suffering a panic attack. I'd been planning this moment in my imagination for years, rehearsing what I'd say and practicing my facial expressions in the bathroom mirror like a maniac. But when the knock came, all of those practiced speeches evaporated. Clara clasped my hand before entering our bedroom. We'd agreed that she'd stay out of sight initially. The first round was just me and them. Opening that door seemed weird. Like those dreams where you're back in high school in your underwear, but I was fully clothed, and they were the exposed ones. Mom seemed tiny. Her hair was box-dyed, not salon perfect. The luxury purse was gone, replaced by something from a bargain store. Dad had reached the age of 15 and 6. The alcohol bloat had vanished, but so did everything else. His face appeared caved inward, with skin hanging where the puffiness used to be. The quiet lasted 10 awkward seconds before Mom made a strange coughing sound and attempted to hug me. I stepped back. The rejection struck her like a physical blow. Dad merely stared, his gaze darting throughout our apartment, taking in the nice furniture and smart TV, proof that his mistake wasn't living in dirt. Mom began crying instantly, which was exactly what I expected. Emotional manipulation was her first language. Dad sought to maintain decorum by asking if they may come in to discuss. I let them pass without offering them refreshments or chairs. Allow them to stand awkwardly in my living room, like unsolicited door-to-door salespeople. Mom continued repeating she couldn't believe she had discovered me. How she hadn't stopped staring. How many nights had she sobbed herself to sleep, wondering if I was safe. Dad nodded, like a dashboard ornament. Neither mentioned the home gym, which used to be my bedroom. Funny how those details slip your mind when you need them. I finally asked why they were here, not what they wanted to talk about, but why they were still in my home after 6 years. The facade cracked instantly. Mom's faux tears came to an end mid-sob. Dad's shoulders dropped even more. They exchanged a look I recognized from childhood, the one they shared when their credit card was denied at the grocery store. That was when the truth came out. They were losing their house. The bank was foreclosing. They had tried everything. Loan modifications, refinancing, and even a GoFundMe campaign that generated $87 from relatives who were fed up with their financial problems. They needed a place to stay. They needed money. They needed their heir. I questioned why they hadn't approached Hugo for assistance. The awkward change began. It turns out they already had. Hugo gave them $3,000 6 months ago, money he couldn't afford as a fresh graduate with student loans. They'd blown through it in weeks and returned for more. Hugo had finally set boundaries, so they had figured out their backup plan: me. The most odd part was watching them go from desperate to calculating in front of me. Mom's gaze continued flitting around, subconsciously pricing my furnishings. Dad asked me casual questions about my job and salary. They were assessing what they could extract from me. I informed them that I needed time to consider. Mom quickly pushed, claiming they only had 2 weeks until eviction. Dad stated that they'd need at least $10,000 to obtain a new home, plus assistance with the deposit. The number grew as they talked. After 20 minutes, I showed them out and promised to call the next day. Mom tried to guilt me for not hugging her goodbye. Dad tried to pretend as if everything was normal, as if they hadn't rendered a 16-year-old homeless and then ignored him for years. The moment they left, I had a mini meltdown in the kitchen. Clara discovered me sitting on the floor, laughing and sobbing at the same moment. Not my proudest moment. She didn't try to remedy things. She simply sat next to me and waited it out. That night we finalized our plan. The following day, I called and invited them to dinner, not at our house, but at a mid-range restaurant where I had rented a private room. They agreed suspiciously swiftly. When they came, they discovered not only me, but Clara, Hugo, who had flown in that morning, and Jack, my genuine family, the individuals who had been there when it counted. Mom's expression when she learned it wasn't a private cash handover was priceless. Dad seemed to want to order a double whiskey but wasn't sure if I was paying. Before we began, I let everyone take their seats and order refreshments. Then I informed them that I knew about their mortgage predicament. Their expressions changed from confusion to hope. They mistook it for an offer of assistance. Instead, I put a folder on the table. The mortgage records revealed that I, through my LLC, now owned their debt. Their house was technically my property. Mom became white. Dad turned red. Hugo concealed a smile as he gazed down at his water glass. Clara fixed them with the cool, analytical eye of someone examining lab specimens. I calmly and clearly stated that I had options. I could foreclose immediately. I could provide a payment plan that they could not reasonably afford. I may allow them to stay as renters under tight terms. Or, and here's the kicker, I could sign the house over to them free and clear if they met specific criteria. The first requirement was that they openly admit how they had treated me, not just to family, but to their friends, neighbors, and everyone. The same folks who laughed at the 1% joke needed to know what occurred next. Second, they would go to family counseling with me and Hugo. Not to mend our relationship, but so they could hear from a competent witness just how their actions had damaged their children. Third, they would sign a legally enforceable agreement promising never to ask me for financial aid again. Mom began crying for real this time. There's no audience to act for, only genuine shock. Dad looked at the materials as if they were written in ancient Sumerian. Hugo finally stood out, encouraging them to be grateful, that what I was offering was more than fair, given what they'd done, and that he'd seen me develop myself from nothing while they replaced me with exercise equipment. Dinner was awful. Mom alternated between defensive fury and manipulative tears. Dad basically sat astonished, except for one moment when he inquired whether I had done this solely to hurt them. I responded with, "No. I did it to balance the books. You discarded me when I had no value to you. Now you want to treat me like an ATM when you need something. That's not how family works. That's not how anything works." They fled without accepting my terms. I gave them 48 hours to decide. These 2 days were unusual. I felt both powerful and hollow. Clara kept checking on me, offering me tea that I didn't drink and sitting next to me as I gazed blankly. Hugo remained on our couch, serving as a buffer between me and unexpected parental visits. They returned on the morning of the deadline. They appeared defeated. They had agreed on my terms. Not because they realized what they had done wrong, but because they had no choice. The documentation was signed with little drama. I had Clara's co-worker, who is a notary, witness everything. The aftermath has been complex. So far they've maintained their word, most likely because they know I still have copies of everything and can take legal action. Mom issued a lengthy, self-pitying apology on Facebook, which still made her the victim. Dad has called twice, awkward discussions in which he appears to be trying to figure out whether I am still upset. Hugo returned home yesterday. Before departing, he held me tightly and told me how proud he was of me for holding them accountable, something he had never had the confidence to do. Is this vengeance? I suppose, but it seems more like a correction. Imagine finally balancing an equation that has been incorrect for 22 years. Am I happy? Not precisely. Satisfied is a better term. The anger is still there, but it no longer feels like a searing hole in my chest, but rather like a scar that has finally healed. Clara and I were laying in bed last night discussing whether we should get a puppy or save for our own house. Normal couple stuff. She inquired whether I regretted any of it. I thought about it for a long time. I was thinking about the 16-year-old kid with $40 in his rucksack. I reflected on all the evenings I had gone hungry. I used to work double shifts with a fever since there was no safety net. Then I considered who I would become as a result of it. How I had created something from nothing. How I found folks who genuinely valued me. I responded. No, I don't regret it. Not the leaving, not the struggling, not even the revenge. Some mistakes turn out to be the best decisions you ever make. My sister took every dollar of my allowance for 5 years. At dinner, I handed Grandpa the proof. What happened next tore the family apart. One day at lunch I passed a stack of call logs, emails and statements to a lawyer named Celine. She didn't recoil. This is simple and not, she informed them. At that point, I recognized that this was more than just betrayal, it was thievery disguised as love. Legally it's fraud. Practically, it's family. Callum is my name. I am the oldest child at 30, I have 3 jobs. Loading trucks at a warehouse in the mornings. Fixing thermostats and office chairs for a property manager in the afternoons. Due to rent being allergic to single incomes, I spend nights delivering food. All night long, I reside in a studio above a nail salon near a bus stop of that magnitude. I have a breathing spreadsheet on my phone and a tool bag in my trunk. There are 4 tabs on it. Gas, food, rent, and surprise. Surprise wins each month. In the same way that some plants are given the best window, my sister Serafina, who is 27 years old, is the favorite child. She's creating a reputation. According to Mom, her brand consists of unboxing videos and pastel blazers. She uses affirmations while she speaks. It's the timing of the universe if she is late on a bill. I'm too stubborn to ask for assistance, which is why I'm late. Arthur King is the grandfather. Like the joke, yes. And he's got money too. He began with a single hardware store and eventually built a little empire of storage facilities and rentals. He's wearing a watch that he could sell for a car and ancient boots. At his house, holidays were a lesson in paradox. Crystal glasses with paper plates. We hosted a family meal at his house on Friday. Roast chicken, a long table, and overly buttery green beans. There were the cousins. There were the cousins' children. Despite my best efforts to scrub, I still had grease beneath my nails after leaving the warehouse. Loud enough for the room, Granddad added as he gave me a hug at the door. I hope you're having fun with your allowance of $7,000. My mind stumbled. What am I? Your stipend? As if we were discussing the weather, he repeated. Started it for Serafina and you in 2019. $7,000 a month each to provide you with a runway. I forgot how hands operate as I stood there with a casserole dish that I couldn't afford to prepare. My face was at a loss for what to do, so I laughed. I have 3 jobs at the moment. I said. Not a single perfume has ever caught my eye. A fork was dropped. My ears rang from the clink. Mom frowned at me as if I had broken the script as she moved away from the stove. Don't begin, she advised. Your grandfather is attempting to enjoy himself tonight. Granddad's sleeve was touched by Serafina, who cooed. Like a nurse, she added quietly. He knows how Callum is. He dislikes accepting assistance. I answered. I love taking help. Too quickly. Simply put, I never encountered it. The middle of Granddad's eyebrows slowly met. You mean you haven't met it? I took my phone out. The history of my banking app is a graveyard of tiny sums. I combed through 3 old inboxes and opened the email from his foundation that I had finally gained access to last month. I went to disbursements and scrolled. I handed him the phone. Monthly assistance recipient for each line item. King, oh, each coordinator's detailed routing is updated. A masked account with 4 digits at the bottom that I recognized because I've Zelled that number 50 times over the years. Serafina's. I read my grandfather's face. He does not read quickly. He is meticulous. He gave me a look. Is this a joke? No, I replied. I've been using store-brand cereal to pay for my tires. It's really immersive if this is a joke. As if it were scorching, he put down the phone. The table fell silent. Just like a room does when a teacher enters without warning. I didn't give Mom the phone when she reached for it. After smoothing her hair, Serafina spoke softly. I had assumed that we wouldn't be discussing money tonight. I said. I thought we weren't doing rerouting. I was astonished by my voice. It was quiet. Granddad got up. Who made the routing change? Sit down, Arthur, Mom urged. We're not. Not allowed, he said. Serafina. However, the word fell like a burden. She raised her hands. Let's all take a deep breath. There was a miscommunication. According to the organizer, having a single landing spot for the home made things easier. I inquired. What household? She said the word family, as though it were a receipt. Granddad gave me a look and asked, when did you find this out? I replied, 30 seconds ago, but then I corrected myself because honesty is a habit that is hard to break. A month ago I had my suspicions. I requested the statements. Today they came. The atmosphere in the room was like being frozen in a brace just before a storm. When Ella D., a young cousin, muttered, "What's allowance?" her father hushed her. As if images of a baseball game would erase everything, someone put the TV on mute. Dinner attempted to restart. It didn't. My body was still acting courteous, so I ate 2 green beans. It tasted like paper in every bite. My phone buzzed at 9:14 p.m., with a number that contained the area code for the bank. I nearly ignored it because I didn't want any more commotion. I took it up. "Mr. King," said a voice. "Octavia from Franklin Trust is here. We're phoning to confirm an outgoing wire request and beneficiary change on your family account. The label reads, urgent. Are you authorized?" "Give up," I murmured, looking at my sister across the table as she pretended to carve a dessert that didn't require cutting. "Tell me the request's name." She informed me that it wasn't hers. There would be no more silence about whatever was going to happen. This wasn't a number with a lot of zeros or a foundation. It began with, "for now." Serafina stole change from my desk to purchase lip gloss when I was 12 years old. She's learning, according to Mom. Mom gave me a sharing lecture after I told her I wanted it back. I worked weekends at my grandfather's storage lot when I was 16, earning a beat-up Honda. Because I enjoy the sense of accomplishment, I changed my own oil and stored my receipts in a shoebox. Because girls need safety, Serafina received her mother's old SUV for her 17th birthday. College was out of the question. 2 months later, she struck a pole, and her mother responded, "It happens." When I scraped my bumper, she added, "You're reckless." I attended a community college for a semester before real life called. My back's complaints taught me the weight of a pallet while I was operating forklifts. After attempting 3 majors, Serafina took a year off to explore her identity, then content, which, depending on your relationship to her, is either a job or not. In our household, money was like the weather. The clouds parted when Serafina needed them. I was instructed to bring an umbrella when I had one. Granddad took us to dinner that evening in 2019 and announced that he was beginning to give us allowances. I still recall that night. He dubbed it a runway. Therefore, you avoid making the same mistakes I did. He told us with pride. Mom listened with pride. After crying, Serafina shared a picture of herself with the words, "Thank you." After I got home, I added a line to my breathing spreadsheet that read, "If this is real." Since entering a number felt like wishing aloud, I didn't. I saw nothing within the first month. There was a delay, I reminded myself. Nothing in the second month. Nothing on the third. Mom said, "Don't bother him. He's busy. Also, Serafina is swamped. Can you help her move boxes?" When I texted her, "Hey, did Granddad?" I did just that. Emails regarding impact reports were sent out by the foundation every 3 months. The coordinator had a different email address on file for me, an old college account I hadn't used since the password expired, so I never received them. Nothing significant ever reached me, despite Serafina's assurance that, "I'll forward the important stuff." My life, meanwhile, was all math. Groceries after 9 since meat is marked down at the shop. In my friend's driveway, the oil is changed. The sole of the shoes said hello. The fact that surprise kept winning made me take a second job. Then a third since gas began to behave like a service that required a subscription. I didn't feel embarrassed. I felt like I was exhausted. Serafina referred to me as hustling culture as if it were a derogatory term. She would wave her hand and say, "You could scale if you stopped thinking small." After the Airbnb collaboration failed, she would ask if I could pay the security deposit for her new location. "Callum, be generous, your sister is building something that helps all of us." Mom would say, and I would assist. When Aunt Isolde's card failed, I purchased her prescription. I sent Mom a Bridge Grocery Venmo. I said to Serafina, "Just until Friday," as if Friday were someone we would all eventually meet. This, I reminded myself, was community. After that, I returned to the warehouse and stacked boxes that had no interest in my story. When a letter from Franklin Trust bearing my name, annual beneficiary certification, arrived at my home in April, it was the first concrete hint about the foundation. Please confirm your contact information for your monthly distribution. My distribution was the message that was displayed. I dialed the number. I laughed and asked, "Cool. Where is it?" A courteous individual replied, "We show you as active since January 2019. It appears the routing was updated by your family coordinator, Mrs. King, that's Mom, to a household account." I had to sit down since my stomach fell so quickly. I called my mother and thanked the stranger. "Hey," I said. "We need to talk about something logistical." She said, "I'm at Pilates." As though that were a response. I remarked, "You rerouted my allowance." She let out a sigh. What a hideous word. "Callum, you didn't need it. You said you were fine." I put it where it could do the most good. The most good for who? For the family. Serafina was launching. "You know you're stable, and your grandfather said it was for you and your sister, that and matters." "It matters that I never agreed," I replied. "It matters that you never told me." "You and your little contracts," she replied. I hung up before I said anything I couldn't take back. "You've always been so rigid." I urged the charity to record my current email address when I called them again. "The grantor is Granddad." "We need approval from your coordinator," they continued. "Or from the grantor." That night I didn't give Granddad a call. The guy who showed me how to check oil and assured me that I wouldn't have to hurt my back as often as he had was still in my mind. The people in between had constructed a toll booth with my name on it, but I wasn't prepared to tell him. So, when I had to be bold later, I did what I always do. I gathered evidence, I asked for statements, I obtained my credit report. I logged into every old inbox I could find. I discovered a lot of threads. Routing has been adjusted. I'm glad it's simplified now. The household prevails. The organizer enthusiastically confirmed modifications I didn't notice in messages, CCing Mom and Serafina. Never to me. The topic lines had my name like a sticker on a box I never opened. Meanwhile, Serafina's online life appeared to be flourishing thanks to the allowance. A trip where the photographs stated #pool-day, but the tag said #work-trip, a new phone, and a new laptop. A post about using a bag that cost a month's worth of my rent to commemorate the grind. I don't dislike my sister, but I was beginning to, so I stopped looking. Next came the meal. Grandfather's embrace. "Hope you're enjoying your $7,000 a month allowance." That was the line that landed like it came with an invoice, and the room fell silent when I said it. I presented the masked account statement to him. His lips became thin. The bank's number appeared on my phone after a few awful bites of not dinner. The individual added, "We're calling to verify a beneficiary change and an outbound wire request on your family account. It's marked urgent." I questioned who was calling. "Serafina's LLC," she replied, a name I knew from a tote bag and her invoices. The other thing that no one knew is that Granddad put up more than just my allowance. A maturity clause was present. The principal of my portion became available for a one-time payout on my 30th birthday last Tuesday, provided I made a written request. I hadn't asked for it. It had been someone else. "Do you authorize a wire for $250,000 to Serafina's Social LLC?" asked Octavia from the bank. "No." Followed by, "Freeze everything tied to my SSN pending in-house fraud review." I thought, if I keep treating this like weather, I will drown, as I looked up from the phone to see my family having struck up a conversation about pie. In his library, Granddad summoned a brief family gathering as if it were a sitcom rather than a slow-motion disaster. Leather chairs, books, and an unpopular fireplace. Mom crossed her arms and sat. Serafina examined her phone, making sure every buzz landed by. Turning the volume up. Sitting made me feel smaller than my words, so I got up. My printed assertions were in Granddad's possession. "This says," he said, "that every monthly distribution listed as O King has gone to an account ending in 4187 since March 2019. Administrative simplification." Mom spoke as if she were giving testimony in front of a committee. "We used a household account. Everything was shared." "I wasn't," I said. In her own words, "You were. You just didn't notice because you were so busy." Serafina got right in. Her words, "And I kept receipts. Rent when I was starting, equipment, flights to conferences. It wasn't like I bought shoes." She had worn shoes that I had seen online for the equivalent of a motorcycle payment. "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" Granddad asked me as he turned to face me. For 1,000 little reasons that, when spoken out, were ridiculous. Since I believed it would give the impression that I was avaricious. I was constantly on the verge of being held in contempt because Mom made my mouth feel like a courthouse. For I did not wish to be the issue, since I was preoccupied with surviving. My response was, I didn't know. Not really until I did. Like a judge who is already aware of the outcome, he gave one nod. He put his phone on speaker and looked at Octavia's number. We need to cancel any beneficiary change requests and reverse any unauthorized wires, he stated. Effective now. Octavia worked effectively. We've placed a temporary hold on the outbound. We'll need written confirmation from the grantor and the beneficiary. We'll also need to verify coordinator permissions. Mom took a seat in front. Don't be theatrical. This is family. His words, this is money. And money makes most families worse. The smile on Serafina's face broke. You're going to humiliate me over a misunderstanding? Without raising his voice, he stated, you've been undermining your brother in installments for 5 years. Mom made one final attempt. Callum never asked for help. He's stubborn. I turned to face Granddad. I then turned to face my sister. I then turned to face my mother, who instilled in me the habit of treating receipts as though they were prayers. I said, I'm not asking. I'm setting a boundary. Serafina gave an eye roll. Oh my God. Therapy words. Grown-up words. I said, here are the simple ones. No more using my name. No more touching my money. No more routing. No more household unless I live in it. Granddad gave a metronomic slow nod. Serafina, you'll repay every monthly amount diverted from Callum's share, he stated. And you'll send him a written accounting of what you spent. We'll decide if any of it counts as family expenses. Spoiler, it doesn't. He looked at his mother. You are removed as coordinator. Effective immediately. Mom got completely white. You don't mean that. I do, he said. You forgot what the money was for. She said. And what was it for? When he said, for runway. Not for spectacle. Serafina's tone sharpened. This is revenge, not fairness. I gave a headshake. The sentence sounded like a lock clicking. This isn't about revenge. This is about closure. My hands ceased to tremble. Do you want the monthly still? Granddad inquired, glancing at me. Or the principal distribution, or both paused until you decide. Pause, I said. I want to think like a person who isn't drowning. The room moved about. Knowing that Granddad detests it, Mom got up and walked out without slamming the door. Serafina texted someone 3 times in a panic, most likely the person who was waiting for the undeliverable wire. Before tightening a bolt, Granddad placed his hand on my shoulder in the same manner. His words were, we'll make it right. Not pretty. Right. Pretty has been our problem, I responded. His mouth was partially open in a smile. There you are. The first 48 hours were noisy. I have a metronome on my phone. Mom. In front of your grandfather, you made your sister look bad. Serafina. You had the option to approach me first. Once more, Mom. He's elderly. He has no idea how money moves these days. Serafina. My business is being ruined by you. Unknown number. We would want to verify that the wire transfer to Serafina's social LLC has been cancelled. Aunt Maribel. I've always said that your mother spent her money excessively. Thorne, your cousin. Well done. Don't let anyone know that I said it. With the exception of my employer, Granddad, and the warehouse crew chat where we share images of cursed pallets, I silenced everyone. Even after taking a lengthy shower, the math remained. I wore the nice socks. I left for work. The restrooms in Building C were furious. Legacies don't matter to toilets. I felt a sense of relief. I had lunch with a lawyer who was recommended by a friend. Celine was her name. She used bullet points as she spoke. As if it were legal, I handed her a stack of documents, including emails, statements, the bank's call log, a screenshot of Serafina's LLC, and a household account note bearing my name. She told me, this is simple and not, as she turned the pages. Legally, identity misuse, unauthorized transfer, breach of grantor intent. Practically family. Saying, I don't want a court. I want a wall. She stated, we can build one. A demand letter to repay diverted funds into your account. A new trust administrator, fraud alerts, and a directive to the foundation. No coordinator except you and the grantor. Also, passwords. Change them everywhere. I followed her instructions. A credit freeze so severe that it most likely froze my high school yearbook, a new bank, and a new email. Since 2020, I had somehow managed to pay for Mom's streaming services, so I removed my name off them. Because sometimes closure means releasing your wallet from a future you didn't sign up for, I canceled an old card that continued getting charged for household Amazon. In order to be the word receipt in a lawsuit, Granddad employed a forensic accountant. A spreadsheet that would make a saint curse was sent to us. Since March 2019, $7,000 has been reported under O each month. King defeated X4187. Notes: office, travel, and brand costs. Complete. I needed to take a seat. Since the number is a character in this story and I don't want to give it any more lines, I won't write it here. I received an email from Serafina that included a 4-page PDF document with the subject apportionment. When Mom was short, we paid her HOA. The family gains from our investment in my company. Callum didn't. Inquire. Let's be mature and not make this ugly, says the final line. I sent it on to Celine. Then she sent Serafina and Mom a letter that contained terms like misappropriation, restitution, fiduciary duty, and my new favorite, cease. She responded, "We're adults. That's why it's in writing." It wasn't impolite. There was a pay-labeled door on the wall. I prepared for what lay ahead. It originated in the typical way. "You're removing food from your sister's mouth, Mom." Me. "For the past 5 years, she has been eating off of me." Mom. "You don't show gratitude." Me. "For what purpose?" Mom. "On behalf of the family we provided you." Me. "I gave you the family. Go ahead and read." No response. Serafina took an alternative approach. "Let's talk without lawyers." The coffee shop where we met served drinks with extra adjectives. She appeared to be someone who dislikes dim lighting because she was wearing sunglasses and a white blazer indoors. She began by crying. She declared, "I didn't steal. I allocated." Calmly. "You stole," I said. "You don't understand how building something works," she replied. "You should be proud. I put our name out there." I asked, "What's our name?" "You mean my name?" Like a singer switching keys, she wiped her eyes and went to wrath. She remarked, "You love being a victim. You could have asked for rent money any time." When I said I didn't want rent money, I wanted my money, she remarked, "You're so small." "Maybe," I replied. "But small pays its own bills." She got up. Her words, "This is a battle." "No," I replied. "This is accounting." That night Granddad called. I'm not used to hearing him sound elderly. "I should have watched it closer," he stated. I thought I was helping. Instead I lit a match and walked away. I remarked, "You were helping. It just got repurposed." "Your mother's out as coordinator," he said, as if letting himself know. "I'm putting a professional in place. If you want monthly, it'll go straight to you. If you want the principal, we'll do it by the book. If you want neither, I won't be offended." When I said, "I want a fence," then I want to think. "Good," he said. "Because the only time money is evil, is when it's a secret." The road was bumpy the next week, but only when we pulled over did it cease bumping. Serafina's wiring was unsuccessful. Her fans congratulated her when she shared a black and white story with the caption, "Some people don't like to see you win." She sobbed as she spoke live about the betrayal of her family. I didn't observe. I ignored a screen capture that a cousin emailed me with the description, LOL. A family gathering at Mom's house with a pot roast that tasted like the 1990s was her final big gesture. Celine was brought on Zoom by me. Mom disliked that, but since she enjoys entertaining, she kept things going. Celine reviewed the figures. "We're asking for repayment of diverted monthly distributions to Callum's account. 30 days, she stated. "We're not asking for punitive damages, we're not filing a police report, we're not going to court if you comply." Serafina's laughter was devoid of humor. "You can't squeeze blood from a stone," she stated. Selena remained still. "Good thing we're squeezing it from money." Mom tried crying. She said, "You're his sister." As though I was unaware of it. "I know," I replied. "That's why I'm not pressing charges. That's why I'm asking for a plan. That's why this isn't a scene. It's a line." Everything was different when we departed, and nothing was signed. In any case, a partial restitution transfer appeared in my new account 2 days later. It wasn't from Serafina, it was from Granddad. He sent a message. "She'll repay me. You're not my bill collector. You're my grandson." Like a character in a movie who eventually lets go of their jaw, I sobbed for 10 minutes on my kitchen floor while wrapped in a towel. Because I wasn't juggling 2 jobs at once, my work became easier. On paper, I still held 3 jobs, but the balance changed. My manager didn't fire me because I declined an additional shift. My feet hurt from my old boots, so I got new ones. There were no numbers in it when I inhaled. Late-night texts were still coming in. Hurricanes and group chats persisted. Some family members still considered gossip to be a game. However, my mind also contained a locker with a door. Mine, it said. 5 weeks have passed. There is a qualified administrator present. I get emails that are addressed to me and contain my name. The monthly doesn't happen on its own. I requested that Granddad put it on hold while I consider my personality when I'm not working hard to remain motionless. The main is positioned behind a procedure, not beneath my sister's cursor, as it should be. I text Serafina when we need to discuss Mom and the holidays. I ignore her flares when she says things like, "You made me look bad." Like coupons, Mom sends me stories about forgiveness and pictures of sunsets. I adore them. I don't understand. I posted the following 5 lines to the cabinet in my kitchen, where the coffee is kept. Never to see again. I don't send money I can't afford. Household doesn't give you the right to use my name. For those who would rather use magic, I don't explain math. I don't respond to inquiries about money via phone, email, or any other method. I don't feel bad about locks on doors that ought to have been secured from the beginning. Every time I cook eggs, I read them aloud. It feels both forceful and stupid at the same time. Granddad stopped by the other day with a look and a bag of bolts. Between us, we fixed 1 unsteady object and 3 wobbly chairs. He continued, "I wanted you to have options, not obligations." "I wanted that too," I said. As he does after finishing a task, he placed his palm on the table and tapped twice. "Good." He continued, "If you want a moral, it's boring and it works. Don't pay for the story where you are the villain and the sponsor. Don't call a pipeline a misunderstanding. Don't let a banner that says family cover a receipts drawer. Build a fence, keep a door, use both. This isn't about revenge. This is about closure." The studio above the nail salon is still where I am. The bus continues to sigh. Even though I still have a tool bag with me, my heart doesn't race as my phone buzzes at 9:14 p.m. My finger is on the button if the bank calls. According to the cabinet, if the family calls, the call is sent to voicemail. The allowance is not me. The sponsor is not me. I have the authority to choose what I will fund with cash, time, and quiet. My parents kicked me out for getting a job instead of babysitting their kids. Weeks later, their perfect life collapsed as I exposed their lies. My parents cut me off because I got a job and couldn't babysit anymore, and then lied to the rest of the family when asked about it. So I went nuclear and exposed them. And now they're attempting to force me back because their new babysitter has quit. I obtained my first job 2 months after I turned 17. But when I told my parents about it, their first words were, "Who's going to babysit our kids?" I should have been surprised, but I wasn't since I knew my parents. So I said, "Well, who's going to pay for my college tuition?" I intended to stump them. You know, they had previously informed me that if I wanted to attend college, I had to pay for it myself. But instead of yielding, they began laughing as if my remark was the funniest thing in the world. You're a woman, and women should be grateful for the opportunity to care for children, whether it's free or paid. Of course, in my situation it was free. My father then stepped in with some wise words. You don't just get to be selfish and abandon the family. Julia, do you know how much a babysitter for 4 kids costs these days? I tried to make a compromise by telling them that some of the money I earned from work could go to them and the kids, but they didn't care. And they felt that because I wasn't spending my life caring for their children, I deserved to be kicked out. They instructed me to pack my stuff and go. I simply rolled my eyes in return. I ran upstairs, but for the first time in a long time, I allowed myself to feel it. The sadness, the betrayal, and most importantly, the grief of knowing that I would never know a life where my parents loved me. I didn't bother wiping away the tears, instead focusing on packing as many clothes as possible into a rucksack. After 10 minutes they yelled at me to hurry up and we departed for my cousin's. On the way there, my parents were attempting to persuade me to reconsider. My father reminded me of how much my brothers adored me, or more particularly, how no one else could make them stop sobbing like I could. Their manipulation wasn't even very good, but for some reason, I felt bad. I started pondering whether I was truly selfish. My mother even began crying, not because she missed me, but because they suddenly had to pay for a babysitter. So when we arrived at my cousin Susan's house and they drove away without saying goodbye, I felt even more guilty, especially when she opened the door, since her face instantly lit up with delight and she gave me the first genuine smile I'd seen in a long time. Kindness felt so foreign to me that as soon as we stepped inside, I burst into tears. Her face sank and she attempted to console me. Okay. Kind of. My love, why don't you just help your parents out a little? Help. I'd cut off friends, dropped my grades, and given up everything to care for their children. I didn't mean to yell, but I couldn't stop the rage inside me. I turned to face her, disgusted by her offer. But I noticed a genuine shock on her face. Your parents told me you were acting entitled and just didn't want to help out when you had nothing to do all day. I burst into tears again, but this time in her arms. I told her the complete truth. Why I ended up at her house, while she embraced me and assured me I would be secure under her roof. Surprisingly, she appeared anything but angry. But I soon realized she was more than simply angry. I ended up weeping myself to sleep that afternoon. I didn't get up until a few hours later, when I heard Susan yell. It was located in the room next door. When I heard the fury in her voice, I sat up straight. She was normally a very quiet, timid person, so hearing her say this was really unexpected. It was clear that she was speaking to my parents. I couldn't understand what she was saying, but I knew she was putting it on them. I remember feeling a genuine smile go across my face. It was the first time anyone had stood up for me. When I heard her hang up, I lay back down and appeared to be still sleeping. Without realizing I was awake, she began speaking aloud, something Susan hadn't done since I was a child. But what she said made me shoot up. Apparently my parents had already hired a new free babysitter. They always had one ready. This whole affair was a ruse to get me kicked out of the house and out of their hair for good. After all of this, Susan sighed and said I deserved better before going to bed. And that was when I sat up. Realizing she was correct. I deserved better parents. And if I couldn't get it, I deserved at least a refund. My plan was bulletproof. Do you realize that every family has one gossipy aunt? Well, we have one too. And I texted her every little juicy detail about what happened between me and my family. The message ended up being 1,400 words long. I quickly turned off my phone, fearful of the consequences. And the next morning, when I finally had the courage to switch it back on, my soul departed my body. My phone was flooded with notifications, not just from my gossipy Aunt Julia, but from nearly every family member I had contact information for. Aunt Julia apparently took my 1,400-word text and immediately forwarded it to everyone in the family group chat. I went through the texts, my heart beating against my chest. There were dozens of them. Some people defended my parents, claiming I was simply a dramatic teenager, but a surprising amount supported me. My Uncle Joseph wrote a full paragraph about how upset he was with his sister, my mother, for treating me like a live-in nanny rather than her daughter. My grandmother Elizabeth wrote a note saying she was heartbroken and that she had raised her children better than this. Susan entered the guest room where I was staying and sat down beside me on the bed. She also held her phone in her hand. Susan grumbled, "Are you kidding? Julia lives for this kind of drama. But honestly, maybe it's good that everyone knows what's been going on." I wasn't sure about that. On the one hand, it felt fantastic that people finally believed me. On the other hand, I knew my parents would be furious, and I still needed to figure out what to do next. I had a job, but no permanent residence. I was still in high school, and despite everything, I missed my younger siblings deeply. My telephone rang. It was my father phoning. I looked at Susan, terror building in my chest and my hands trembling slightly, but I knew I had to confront them eventually. I took a deep breath and pressed the accept button. I answered the phone, ready for the impending blast. I was not disappointed. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" My father's voice was so loud that I had to pull the phone away from my ear. Susan could also hear it and her eyes widened. I didn't have a chance to react before he resumed his outburst. He told me I was dead to him, that I had disgraced them in front of their entire family, and that I should forget about ever returning home. I just sat there, taking it all in, my eyes welling up with tears again. When he eventually ran out of steam, all I could say was, "I didn't mean for Aunt Julia to tell everyone." "You stupid, ungrateful," he repeated, but I heard my mother in the distance. She grabbed the phone from him. Her voice was icy cold as she spoke. "Julia, you've made your choice. Don't expect any support from us moving forward. Not for college, not for your phone bill, nothing." I felt my stomach drop. I hadn't even considered all of those practical aspects. My phone was still on the family plan. I was banking on them to help me with college. "What about my stuff?" I said, my voice soft. "You took what you needed," my mother responded. "Anything else we'll donate if you don't arrange to pick it up by the weekend." The call ended abruptly. I sat there, staring at my phone and feeling absolutely overwhelmed. Susan wrapped her arm around me and squeezed. "Well, that sounded pleasant," she remarked, attempting to lighten the atmosphere. "Don't worry about your stuff. We'll go get it tomorrow while they're at work." I nodded, still shocked. My parents had virtually rejected me for working part-time at a coffee shop. What type of parents did this? Susan called in ill from work the next day, so we drove over to my folks' house. I still had my key so we could enter in without issue. The home was peaceful. My parents were at work while my siblings attended school and daycare. It felt strange to be back so soon, as if I had broken in rather than returned home. I promptly walked to my room and began gathering everything that I couldn't fit in my backpack the first time. My favorite books, more clothes, my laptop, and some photos of my siblings that I kept on my desk. Susan was in my parents' home office as I packed. I had no idea what she was doing, but I was focused on grabbing my belongings and getting out before anyone arrived home unexpectedly. Susan carried a folder under her arm as we left. I asked her what it was, and she simply shrugged and said she'd tell me later. We packed my belongings into her car and headed back to her flat. Susan finally showed me what she had grabbed when she returned to her apartment. It was a folder that contained my birth certificate, social security card, and other crucial paperwork. She had also taken my parents' spare credit card, which they kept for emergencies. "You're going to need these," she said, "and they owe you for all the free babysitting." I was shocked. "We can't use their credit card, that's stealing." Susan rolled her eyes. "Relax. We're not going on a shopping spree, but you need clothes for work, a new phone plan, and some basic necessities. They owe you at least that much." I wasn't comfortable with it, but there weren't many alternatives. I had $50 and would not receive my first paycheck for 2 weeks. So I reluctantly consented to use the card, but only for things that were really necessary. We went to the mall in the afternoon. I purchased a few black t-shirts and slacks for my coffee shop work, as well as a low-cost prepaid phone and toiletries. Overall, we spent around $200 on the card. Still, I felt awful about it, despite Susan's assurance that it was nothing compared to what a true babysitter would have cost them over time. The next day, I worked my first shift at the coffee shop. I was nervous but delighted to start making my own money. The shop was called The Daily Grind. I know, it's quite original. Jaime, the manager, was really cool and patient during my training. I messed up a couple orders and struggled with the espresso machine, but it wasn't too horrible. When I returned to Susan's after my shift, I noticed 3 missed calls from an unknown number. I paused before returning the call, concerned that it could be my parents on another phone. It was not. Emma, my younger sister, was using my older brother's iPad. She was just 10. But she managed to remember my phone number. She was crying, asking why I had left and when I would return. It broke my heart to hear her upset. I attempted to explain in a way she could understand without criticizing our parents. I told Mom I had a job and needed to move closer to it, but I still loved her and my other siblings very much. She didn't fully understand, but she made me promise to come see her soon. I promised, even though I had no idea how I was going to do it. I was a complete wreck after that call. Susan recommended we have pizza and watch idiotic movies to take my mind off things. It helped a little, but I kept thinking about my siblings and how much I missed them. The following few days settled into a pattern. I'd go to work, then return to Susan's, complete my homework, and repeat. I was constantly fatigued from trying to stay up with academics while working almost every day after class. But at least I was earning money now. About a week after everything went down, my Aunt Julia texted me, asking if I wanted to come to Sunday dinner at her place. She indicated that my grandparents will be there, as well as other relatives who wanted to visit me. I hesitated. Was this some sort of trap? However, Susan believed it would be beneficial for me to see supporting family members. That Sunday, Susan drove me to Aunt Julia's place. As soon as we went in, my grandmother raced over and grabbed me tightly. She was crying, so I started crying too. I had no idea how much I wanted a grandmother's embrace until that moment. The supper was genuinely enjoyable. Nobody pressed me to talk about my parents, but they made it apparent that they were there for me. Even before we left, my grandfather slipped me an envelope. I opened it in the car and discovered 5 crisp $100 bills inside. I tried to call him and tell him it was too much, but he refused to take it back. He explained that it was to assist me get back on my feet. The money was a big comfort. I quickly used some of it to switch from my parents' phone plan to my own. I also opened a bank account without my parents' names, as Susan had instructed. Things seemed to be going well until they didn't. 2 weeks after I moved in with Susan, I returned home from school to find her sitting at the kitchen table, serious expression on her face. "We need to talk," she continued, motioning for me to sit down. My heart fell. Was she kicking me out too? Where might I go? "Your mom called me today," Susan said. "They've noticed the charges on their emergency credit card." I felt nauseous. I should have known they'd examine the statements or receive a buy notification. What looked to be a spare card was one that was routinely monitored. "What did she say?" I inquired. "She accused us of theft and threatened to call the police if we didn't return the card and repay every penny," Susan said grimly. "But here's the kicker. She also wants you to come home." I was shocked. What? Why would they want me back after everything that happened? Susan's expression became stern. "Because their new babysitter quit after just 1 week. Apparently 4 kids under 10 is too much for most people." "Who knew?" I chuckled cruelly. Obviously that was the cause. They did not miss me. They missed out on free childcare. "I'm not going back," I stated firmly. "I can pay them back for the card from my paychecks, but I'm not going back to being their slave." Susan nodded, relieved. "That's what I told them. But they're pretty upset about the money. Your mom mentioned something about small claims court." I had a flicker of panic. Could they actually take us to court? Will we go into trouble? I still had the majority of my grandfather's $500, so I could repay them straight away. But the entire experience left me feeling uneasy and angry. The following day at school was dreadful. I could not focus on anything. I was expecting authorities to turn up and arrest me for credit card fraud or something. By midday, I was a nervous wreck. My friend Martha saw something was awry and brought me out to the courtyard to discuss. I wound up telling her everything. She was horrified at what my parents had done. "That's actual child neglect," she remarked. "They can't just throw you out because you got a job. You're still a minor." I hadn't really considered it that way. I was so used to being regarded as an adult at home that I forgot I was still legally a child. Martha's mother was a lawyer, and she advised I speak with her about my possibilities. I hesitated. I didn't want to involve more people in my family drama, Martha insisted, and she took me to her house after school. Mrs. Thompson, Martha's mother, listened to the entire narrative without interrupting. When I concluded, she had a lot of detailed questions regarding dates, what was said, and who else was aware of the issue. I responded as best I could. "Julia, what your parents did is not okay," she finally said. "They're legally obligated to provide for you until you're 18. They can't just kick you out because you won't babysit." She told me that I had options. I could apply for emancipation, which would legally make me an adult before I turned 18, or we could report my parents to Child Protective Services, which could force them to return me or place me in foster care. Neither choice sounded ideal. Emancipation would include accepting full adult duties at a time when I was already struggling to manage school and job, and CPS may take my siblings away as well, which I strongly opposed. Mrs. Thompson must have noticed my hesitancy. She proposed a third option: have another relative apply for interim guardianship. That way, I could legally stay with someone like Susan or my grandparents without causing my parents any trouble. I thanked her for her advice and agreed to think about it. On my way back to Susan's, I received a text message from an unfamiliar number. My youngest brother, Alex, was using my father's old phone. He said my parents were arguing all the time now, and the house was a disaster without me there. Reading his messages made my heart ache. I missed him and my other siblings a lot. When I returned to Susan's, I found a surprise waiting for me. My grandparents were sitting in the main room with serious attitudes. For a brief moment, I thought something horrible had happened. "Don't look so worried," my grandmother replied, patting the couch next to her. "We just want to talk about what happens next." They had learned about the credit card situation from my mother, but unlike my parents, they were not upset. They were concerned. They said I shouldn't be working so much while finishing high school. They urged me to focus on my schooling. My granddad cleared his throat. "We have a proposal for you. We'd like you to come live with us until you graduate. We have plenty of room, and you won't have to work so many hours to support yourself." I was stunned. My grandparents lived in a lovely home about 30 minutes from my school. Moving in with them would solve a lot of problems, but I was concerned about imposing on them. They were presumably in their 70s and didn't want a teenager to spoil their retirement. "We've already discussed it with your parents," my grandmother said, noticing my uncertainty. "They've agreed. As long as you visit them and the kids every weekend." Obviously, they had a condition. They still wanted to use my free babysitting services. But one day every week was far better than every day. And, as much as I enjoyed Susan's hospitality, living with my grandparents would be a major step up from couch surfing. So I agreed. That weekend I relocated my belongings to my grandparents' house. They'd turned their home office into a bedroom for me. The room was modest but comfortable, with a twin bed, a desk, and a bookshelf. My grandma had even purchased new bedding and drapes to make it feel like my personal area. My first night there, I slept better than I had in weeks. There was something relaxing about being in their house, away from the commotion of my parents' home, but still surrounded by family who cared about me. The next morning was Saturday, which meant I had my first visitation with my parents and siblings. My grandmother drove me over and promised to pick me up at 6 p.m. sharp. I was nervous the whole way over. When we arrived at my parents' house, my siblings ran out the front door. Emma rushed into my arms, and the smaller ones crowded around me, all chattering at once. I hugged them fiercely, realizing how much I missed seeing their little faces. My parents were standing in the doorway, observing. My mother's expression was unreadable, but my father appeared irritated. Possibly because he had to deal with the kids all morning before I came. After my grandma left, I spent the day playing with my siblings, assisting them with their homework, and keeping up with their lives. It was almost like old times, except for the tension that existed whenever my parents were in the room. My mother ultimately cornered me in the kitchen as I was preparing lunch for the children. "So you're too good to live here anymore, but you'll take handouts from your grandparents," she told me with a sneer. I tried to remain cool. "I'm just trying to finish high school without being homeless," I said, concentrating on making sandwiches rather than looking at her. "You were never going to be homeless," she remarked. "You're so dramatic." I bit my tongue to prevent from mentioning that they were the ones who kicked me out. Instead, I simply carried the plates of food to the dining room for my siblings. The rest of the day was awkward, but doable. My father mainly ignored me, which was great with me. At 6 p.m., my grandmother's automobile drew up outside. I hugged my siblings farewell and promised to come next weekend. My mom called after me as I walked out the door. "Don't forget to bring your babysitting money next time." I turned, perplexed. "What babysitting money?" She rolled her eyes. "The $500 you owe us for stealing our credit card." I was going to protest, but concluded it wasn't worthwhile. I simply nodded and left. In the car, I informed my grandmother what had happened. She was angry, but said nothing until we were halfway home. "Your mother always had a selective memory," she finally admitted. "She seems to have forgotten all the money they saved using you as a nanny for 5 years." I was startled. My grandma had never reprimanded my parents in front of me before. It felt good to have someone else see the unfairness of the situation. Life at my grandparents' place rapidly settled into a new pattern. I went to school, worked less shifts at the coffee shop, and focused more on homework. My grades began improving almost immediately. On weekends I went to see my siblings as arranged, but I dreaded the encounters with my parents. The credit card issue was handled when my grandfather insisted on paying it off himself, claiming that it was worth every penny to get me out of that toxic environment. I agreed to pay him back, but he dismissed my concerns. A month after I moved in with my grandparents, I received some surprising news at school. My English teacher, Mrs. Melissa, invited me to stay after class. She gave me an essay I'd written on family relations and said it was one of the best she'd ever read from a kid. "Have you thought about applying for college scholarships?" she asked you. "With your writing skills and grades, you could qualify for some good ones." Given everything else going on in my personal life, I stated that I hadn't given college much thought lately. Mrs. Melissa informed me of numerous scholarship opportunities designed exclusively for children who had overcome difficulty. She even volunteered to help me with my applications. For the first time in months, I felt optimistic about my future. I began exploring colleges and scholarships with fresh interest. My grandparents were helpful, guiding me through the applications and even taking me on campus tours at a couple nearby universities. When my parents discovered out, they were not pleased. During one of my weekend visits, my father noticed me working on a scholarship essay on my laptop. "College?" he mocked. "What a waste of money. You should be saving up to get your own place instead of mooching off your grandparents." I ignored him and continued typing. This only made him furious. "You know we're not paying for any of it, right? Not a single penny," he muttered. I gazed up at him calmly. "I know. I'm applying for scholarships and financial aid." He appeared unhappy that his statement hadn't irritated me more. He walked away, mumbling something about ungrateful kids who believe they're too good for honest work. For weeks I spent the majority of my free time applying for scholarships. Mrs. Melissa examined my essays, and my grandparents assisted me in gathering all of the essential documentation. By the spring, I had applied to 6 different institutions and more than a dozen scholarship programs. The first acceptance letter arrived on a Tuesday in April. I received a half scholarship to attend State University. I was ecstatic, but it wasn't enough to cover all the expenses. I kept hoping for good news from other schools. That following week, something unexpected occurred during my weekend visit to my parents' place. My mother inquired how my college applications were doing. It was the first time she had expressed any interest in my future goals. I told her about the admission from State, trying not to seem very enthusiastic because I knew she wouldn't like it. To my amazement, she did not make any snarky remarks. Instead, she nodded and continued. "Your Aunt Julia went there. She liked it. It wasn't much, but it was the most support I'd received from either of my parents in months. I choose to see it as a positive sign." The next big news broke 2 weeks later. I got an email message that altered everything. One of the national merit scholarships I applied for had chosen me as a finalist. If I won, it would pay for my whole 4-year tuition at any public university in the state. I was elated. My grandparents took me out to supper to celebrate reaching the finals. Susan drove over to join us. The finalist interviews were scheduled for the following week. I spent days preparing for the interview. My grandmother assisted me in selecting a professional suit consisting of a navy blue blazer and skirt that made me appear older than 17. My grandfather drilled me with practice questions until I could comfortably express my ambitions and aspirations. I was quite nervous on the day of the interview. The scholarship committee was made up of 5 members, each with strong academic qualifications. They asked about my essay, my experiences, and my future ambitions. I discussed my desire to become a child psychologist, which was driven in part by my own family dynamics experiences. I left the interview feeling like I had done my best, but I wasn't sure whether it was good enough. The results would not be released for another 2 weeks. The 2 weeks were the longest of my life. I obsessively checked my email, jumping whenever my phone produced a notification sound. My grandparents kept urging me to relax, that no matter what happened, we'd work it out. But I realized how much the scholarship would impact my life. Meanwhile, my relationship with my parents remained problematic. During my weekend visits, I noticed my mother making more of an attempt to be polite, even asking about school occasionally. My father was still aloof, but he wasn't aggressively hostile anymore. My siblings, of course, were always delighted to see me. Emma began phoning me every few days simply to chat, which I enjoyed. When I went, the younger ones would argue over who would sit close to me or show me their drawings first. These times made the awkwardness with my parents worthwhile. Finally, on a dreary Tuesday afternoon, the email came. I was at my grandparents' house doing homework at the kitchen table when my phone vibrated with a notice. The subject line said, "National Merit Scholarship Decision." My hands were shaking so terribly that I could barely open the email. My grandmother saw and approached behind me, laying a steadying hand on my shoulder. I took a deep breath and tapped the notice. The email opened, and I scanned the first paragraph, my heart beating. "Congratulations." I didn't even have to read the rest. I had been awarded full tuition for 4 years at any public university in the state. I burst into tears as a rush of relief and delight washed over me. My grandmother hugged me hard and cried. My grandfather came in from the garage to see what was going on, and he was soon rejoicing as well. That evening, we held an impromptu party. Susan brought a cake, and Martha stopped by with balloons. Mrs. Melissa also made an appearance with a gift, a lovely leather-bound journal for my college years. In all the excitement, I almost forgot to inform my folks. I called them that night, anxious about their reaction but eager to tell the news. My mother answered the phone. I told her about the scholarship, trying to maintain a calm tone despite my excitement. There was a pause at the other end of the line. "Well," she finally said, "I guess all that studying paid off." It wasn't particularly enthusiastic, but it wasn't negative either. I decided to count it as a win. "Does this mean you're definitely moving away for college?" she inquired. I said that I was still selecting between colleges, but that I would probably be living on campus someplace. There was another pause. "The kids will miss you," she added quietly. And then, "We all will." It was the closest thing to admitting they cared about me that I'd heard in years. I wasn't sure how to answer. So I simply thanked her and said I'd see them over the weekend as usual. After that call, I sat on my bed for a while, reflecting on how much had changed in just a few months. I'd gone from being my parents' live-in nanny to living with my grandparents and receiving a full scholarship to college. It wasn't the road I had planned for my life, but it could be just what I needed. The next day at school, I found myself smiling for no apparent reason all day. The future, which had appeared so dark just months before, suddenly appeared bright and full of opportunities. I had folks who believed in me and supported my goals. And I began to realize that perhaps I had always earned that support. Things continued to improve as April progressed into May. I spent the majority of my time at my grandparents' house, which seemed more like home than my parents ever did. I continued to visit my siblings every weekend, but the visits became less unpleasant over time. My mother began making small talk with me, and my father at least stopped staring at me from across the room. Something unusual occurred on a Saturday in mid-May. I was playing with my younger brother in the living room when my mother walked in and stood there, watching us. After a few minutes, she cleared her throat. "Julia, can we talk in the kitchen for a minute?" My stomach immediately tightened up. Every time my parents wanted to communicate, it left me feeling bad, but I nodded and followed her. She was busy making coffee in the kitchen and didn't notice me. I simply stood there awkwardly, waiting for whatever bomb she was about to drop. "Your father and I have been talking," she added at length, "about your graduation next month." Oh, right, graduation. With everything else going on, I had scarcely considered it, but now that she'd mentioned it, I realized I had no idea who would attend the wedding. Will my parents show up? Would it be odd to have them and my grandparents in the same place? "We'd like to host a small party for you," she said. "Here at the house, after the ceremony." I must have appeared absolutely surprised because she giggled a little. "Don't look so surprised, you're still our daughter." I wasn't sure what to say. They had treated me as if I were nothing more than free labor for months, and now they wanted to celebrate my graduation. It did not make sense. "Why?" I blurted out, unable to stop myself. My mother's face sank a little. She set down her coffee cup and finally looked straight at me. "Because we're proud of you," she replied quietly. "The scholarship, college. You've done well, Julia." I simply stared at her. Who was this woman and what did she do to my mother? I wanted to know if she was okay or had been abducted by aliens. Before I could react, my father walked in. He nodded awkwardly at me before grabbing a beer from the fridge. "Did your mother tell you about the party?" he said. I nodded, still too perplexed to speak. "Good," he said. "We were thinking just family. Your grandparents, Susan, a few aunts and uncles." They included my grandparents and Susan, who had practically saved me from them. This was growing strange by the minute. That sounds nice," I said. "Thank you." My father nodded again and left the kitchen. My mother went back to fretting over coffee cups. I dashed back to the living room as quickly as I could, my head spinning. That night I informed my grandparents about the party offer. My grandmother developed an odd expression on her face. "Your Aunt Julia went to visit them last week," she told me. "Had a long talk with your mother apparently." That explained a few things. Aunt Julia was my mother's older sister and the only person she would genuinely listen to. If Julia had confronted her about her treatment of me, it might have reached her in a way that no one else could. "So, should I let them throw this party?" I requested an answer. "Or is it some kind of trap?" My granddad chuckled. "Not everything is a trap, Julia. Sometimes people just realize they've made mistakes and want to fix them." I wasn't sure about it, but I decided to give them the benefit of doubt. The next day, I texted my mother, saying I wanted to have the party. She replied with a thumbs-up emoji, possibly the most enthusiastic answer I'd ever received from her. Finals and graduation preparations took up the next few weeks quickly. I was placed 12th in my class, so I got to wear one of those expensive honor cords with my hat and gown. My grandparents were so pleased that they brought me shopping for a new outfit to wear under my gown. Martha and I spent the entire Saturday decorating our caps. Nonetheless, she persisted on mine in dazzling gold letters. It felt appropriate given what I'd gone through. Graduation day came with wonderful June weather. I got up early, too excited and frightened to sleep in. My grandma made her famous blueberry pancakes for breakfast, and my grandfather took shots of me as if I were a kid about to start kindergarten. The ceremony started at 2 p.m. When we arrived at school, the parking area was already full of families carrying balloons and flowers. I saw my folks' automobile right soon. It was difficult to miss, with all four of my siblings pressing their faces against the windows and waving madly at me. I waved back, experiencing a strange combination of emotions. Part of me was still upset at all they'd done, but another part was relieved they'd shown up. I had to line up alongside the other graduates as my family secured seats in the auditorium. Martha found me in line and we snapped photographs wearing our adorned caps. The entire experience felt strange, as if I were watching myself in a film about high school graduation rather than actually experiencing it. The ceremony itself was quite standard, boring speeches from the principal and valedictorian, with the band playing pomp and circumstance on an unending loop as we walked across the stage. When they called my name, I heard cheers from several sections of the audience. My siblings were the loudest, of course, but I could also hear Susan's voice and my grandfather's distinctive whistle. Afterward, in the commotion of families locating their grads, I was swept up in a frenzy of hugs and photos. Emma refused to let go of my waist, while my younger brother kept trying to steal my headgear. My parents appeared proud, with my father clapping me on the back and my mother fussing with my hair for photos. Martha raced up to give me one final embrace as we walked to the parking lot. "Are you coming to Jacob's party tonight?" she said. I shake my head. "Family thing," I responded, nodding at my parents. "Maybe I can stop by later." She shrugged. "Text me if you escape," she remarked with a wink, then dashed off to join her family. We all drove back to my parents' house in a caravan, my parents' car with my siblings, my grandparents in their car, and me riding with Susan. Susan kept staring at me while we drove. "Are you okay?" she finally inquired. I nodded. "Just weird, you know. A few months ago they kicked me out and now they're throwing me a graduation party." Susan smiled. "People can surprise you sometimes. Not always in bad ways." When we arrived at the house, I was surprised to see balloons tied to the mailbox and a congratulations graduate banner hanging over the front door. Inside, the dining room table was heaped in food, including a cake with my name on it. More relatives arrived, including Aunt Julia, who hugged me so hard I feared my ribs would crack, Uncle Joseph, and a few cousins I hadn't seen in years. Even Martha's mother, Mrs. Thompson, who had given me legal counsel, came by with a gift card. The celebration was truly enjoyable. My siblings were on their best behavior. My parents were unusually kind, and everyone kept telling me how pleased they were of me. I was waiting for the other shoe to drop, for someone to mention childcare or for my father to make some sarcastic remark about how college was a waste of time, but it never occurred. After cake, my mother declared that it was time for gifts. There were the typical graduation gifts, money, gift cards, and a new laptop from my grandparents, which I almost cried over. But then my parents gave me a tiny package. There was a key inside. I stared at them, puzzled. "It's to our house," my mother explained. "We want you to know you always have a home here, even when you're away at college." I simply stared at the key, absolutely stunned. My father cleared his throat. We didn't handle things well," he admitted hesitantly. "When you got that job, we were wrong to kick you out." Was this actually happening? Was my father genuinely acknowledging they were wrong? I looked around to see whether anyone else was as surprised as I was, but everyone was just smiling as if everything was perfectly normal. "Your Aunt Julia reminded us that parents are supposed to support their children, not the other way around," my mother replied. "We took advantage of you, Julia. And we're sorry." I couldn't believe what I heard. My parents actually apologized. I half expected the ceiling to collapse or aliens to suddenly invade. "We're also sorry about the babysitting," my father explained. "We've hired a real babysitter now for when you're not here." I looked over at my grandparents, who were beaming with joy. My grandmother gave me an encouraging nod. "Thank you," I eventually managed to say. "That means a lot." The remainder of the celebration passed in a blur. By the time everyone had left, it was nearly 9 p.m. I texted Martha that I couldn't make it to Jacob's party after all. I was too emotionally spent to deal with a high school rager. My grandparents were the last to depart. As they were leaving, my grandmother grabbed me aside. "Your parents called us last week," she explained quietly. "They wanted to know if we'd help them with your college expenses, whatever the scholarship doesn't cover." I was stunned again. "They did?" She nodded. "People can change, Julia. Sometimes they just need a wake-up call." After everyone had left, I found myself alone in the kitchen with my parents. We all avoided making eye contact, resulting in an awkward quiet. Finally, my mother responded, "You're set for State University in August." I nodded. "Yeah, orientation is in July. I got assigned to Thompson Hall." "That's on the north side of campus, right?" my father inquired. "Near the library." I was astonished he knew that. "Yeah, it is." "How did you know?" He shrugged. "I looked it up. Wanted to know where you'd be living." We lapsed into another stillness, but this time it felt less awkward, like we were all simply getting used to our new normal. "You know," my mother remarked tentatively, If you wanted to move back home for the summer, there's room. I thought about it for a bit. Part of me wanted to say no right once, but another part saw they were trying to make amends in their own awkward manner. I'll think about it, I replied. I promised Grandma I'd help her with her garden this summer, but maybe I could split my time. They both nodded, seemingly content with the response. My father checked his watch. It's getting late. Do you want us to drive you back to your grandparents? I shake my head. Susan's coming back to get me in a few minutes. As if on cue, my phone vibrated with a text from Susan informing me that she was on her way. I began assembling my graduation gifts. Leave some of it here if you want, my mother advised. For when you visit. When Susan's automobile arrived outside, my parents brought me to the door. My mother startled me with an embrace, while my father uncomfortably stroked my shoulder. Congratulations again, my mother remarked. We really are proud of you. As Susan drove me back to my grandparents' house, I reflected on how much had changed in just a few months. I had progressed from a free nanny who was not permitted to work to a soon-to-be college student with a full scholarship. When things became tough, I found out who actually had my back, and I discovered that I was stronger than I had realized. Most shockingly, I realized that people can change. My parents were not perfect. Not even close. However, they were making an effort, which was sufficient for the time being. I glanced down at the house key in my palm. Perhaps I'll spend some time at home this summer after all. Not because I had to, but because I wanted to, on my own terms. And it made all the difference. My parents praised my golden child sister while calling me an embarrassment. Now I'm successful, and they're begging me to rescue her career. My parents, who have not spoken to me in 5 years, just contacted me. I am 29 years old. They want me to help them out, or more specifically, my sister. My 31-year-old sister Claire has always been the golden child. My parents never bothered to hide it because she was superior than me in every way back then. Especially academically, which my parents never let me forget since they kept telling me that she was doing so much better than me at school, and that I needed to buckle down if I wanted to be in the same league as my sister. She was accepted into a renowned institution, and 5 years ago, she became the company's youngest vice president. She had been working there since she graduated, and she had always been able to support herself. But later, when she made history by becoming the company's youngest vice president, her expensive corporate career became the norm for me to beat, and my parents couldn't stop rubbing it in. To be honest, I was not interested in working a 9-to-5 job. I'm sure life has its advantages, but I've wanted to be an entrepreneur since I first heard the term. 5 years ago, after working at many locations and accumulating experience in the field that I wanted to work in, I decided that I was finally going to establish my own business, modern and edgy automobile accessories that I designed myself. I had spent enough time on research and development and had a solid business concept to move forward with. So I decided to go to my parents about it first, since despite how they had always treated my sister, I had assumed they would want the best for me as well. After all, they were my parents. So I decided to tell them about it after they had prepared a party for my sister's new employment. 2 days after the party, I approached them in person and explained my idea. I expected some type of response, but instead they just laughed and thought I was attempting to fool them. They found it insulting that after years of self-education, this was my big idea for my future firm. I told them I was serious, but they said I shouldn't quit my work because they'd be embarrassed to introduce their son as a failure. They said they knew my business was doomed from the start because I was not capable, and they didn't want me to fail as severely as my sister. So I had better continue with the job I already had. I was quite offended, so I decided to quarrel with them. I told them that I would go ahead with the business whether or not they supported it. They told me I could do whatever I pleased, but I wasn't free from the repercussions. They warned me that if I pursued my business idea, they would have to take me out of their lives because I would be an embarrassment to them. Something they were already aware of. They also expressed their displeasure with having to introduce their children, one of whom is a vice president at a famous company and the other, at the age of 25, is still trying to sort out his own life. They said they had been thinking about having this conversation with me for a long time, and they finally told me that I could either continue working my way up at my current job and not embarrass them, or I could do whatever I wanted and make a fool of myself. But then I'd lose them. I think it's evident what I did. I decided to cut them out of my life and never spoke to them again after that. I have also not communicated with Claire since then, because she clearly chose our parents' side over mine, which I am comfortable with. She was too haughty in any case, so I avoided her from the start. I'd been dealing with vehicles for a long time, and that's where my company idea came from, so I believed in it. I knew this was something that people wanted, so I decided to go in blind and simply prove my parents wrong. I quit my job and began working for my objective. Now I see that was a risky move, and I should not take it so proudly. I wouldn't advocate it to anyone, but it worked out for me. Within a few months, I had some investors on board and was able to launch my own firm. It was tough at first. I was basically living hand to mouth, relying solely on word-of-mouth marketing. People became aware of my business, and I gained an increasing number of consumers. Then, after approximately a year and a half, things began to pick up, and there was no going back. I'm pretty comfy right now. I have my own place, which is very wonderful. I live in a fantastic area, drive a nice car, and have everything I ever wanted. I wouldn't say I'm a millionaire, but I'm doing well for myself, and I don't consider myself a failure, as my parents had expected. So, I'd say I proved them incorrect, and I'm really thrilled about that. I'm so thrilled about it that I don't even feel the need to include their face, because it's not worth it. Anyway, I have not contacted them in the last 5 years. I even married my girlfriend of 8 years, and we've been married for 2 years. Last month, we discovered that she was also pregnant. I've reached so many milestones, yet I've never sought to contact my parents. They know where to locate me. They can practically contact any relative and ask where I live, so they can pay me a visit. I know they know everything about my life since I've maintained in touch with the rest of our family, and they tell me that my parents ask about me all the time yet never try to contact me. I suppose it is their method of coping with things. Anyway, they eventually contacted me last week and asked if I'd be willing to meet them. I discussed it with my wife, and she said she wanted me to go ahead and see what this was all about. They had not said anything in the communication they had sent me, so I had no idea what to anticipate. But I went ahead and visited them at their home. When I arrived, they greeted me kindly, but I could tell there was something going on. Even when I lived with them, they were never as polite to me. So, even while they made small conversation with me, I sensed they were preparing for something. They finally addressed the elephant in the room. They told me they had heard about my business and wanted to congratulate me. They made no apologies and simply stated that they were delighted I had been able to prove them incorrect and that their initial mistrust had vanished. That was wonderful, and I didn't know what to say, so I simply smiled. But then they told me Claire had been unfortunate in the last few months. Apparently her company was not doing well, and there had been many layoffs. Even high management had been fired, including her. So for the past 4 months, she had been sitting at home, doing nothing. My parents told me that she had been trying to find another employment, but after working for the same firm for so long, she didn't know what to do, and was quite depressed about how things turned out for her. I found it perplexing that they were talking about her because there wasn't much I could do, so I simply let them continue because I wanted to see where they were going with this talk. After a while they got to the point and asked whether I would be willing to hire my sister. She was currently too depressed to apply for employment on her own, and all of the offers she received were below her pay grade. She did need something, and my parents wanted to know whether I would be willing to offer her a position in my company, one that paid well and allowed her to bring her own expertise to the table. When they asked the question, I had no idea what to answer, so I told them I needed some time to think about it and will let them know my decision later. I didn't say yes on purpose since I wasn't sure how to reply. I should have realized they weren't approaching me for no reason, given that they had previously had the opportunity but had never taken it. They were rather happy with themselves. I believe they expected me to say yes, but after returning home, I thought about it for a long, and, after consulting with my wife, decided to decline. She works in a bank and has little to do with my company, but she assured me that this was a professional environment. In here, everything I say goes. So she didn't want to interfere. If I thought I wouldn't be able to work well with my sister, that was what I should do. In any case, she didn't believe my parents' attempts to reconnect with me were sincere, so I had no need to comply. Anyway, I had never pledged to help. Therefore, I had no obligation to provide her with a job. I didn't want to tell them about it since I knew if I said no, they'd take advantage of the situation and make me appear bad. I attempted to avoid any confrontation, but then they began texting me every day to see what my response was. I even ignored it, but they called me back 2 days later and told me I needed to respond. So I informed them that I had thought about it and, after much discussion, had decided that I could not work well with Claire and did not want her to work with me. We'd never had a nice relationship, so I didn't feel obligated to hire her or them. When I mentioned that, they completely flipped out. They began yelling at me about everything they had done for me, including raising me and paying for everything I desired as a child. And now, when they wanted me to repay the favor, I was turning my back on them and pretending that I owed them nothing. I thought it was an extremely harsh thing to say, considering they did everything for me back then because I was completely reliant on them. To be honest, I believe it would be unlawful to simply refuse to do that for me. Besides, that wasn't the point. So I tried to explain to them that I wouldn't be able to work effectively with Claire, which was the only reason I didn't want her in my company. I didn't think they needed to yell at me and behave like that just because of this. Also, we haven't spoken in 5 years because they told me they didn't believe in me and wouldn't invest in my business, so they had no right to think I'd let them bully me around. But they continued to shout at me, claiming that they had only contacted me because they believed that after 5 years, I would have finally let it go, now that I was doing well. Instead, I was being selfish, clinging onto old grudges, and unwilling to aid my own family. They reminded me that Claire was my sister, and because she was in difficulty, I needed to be there for her. They even claimed she would have done the same for me if I had been in her situation. They informed me that if my business had failed, they would have supported me, and I owed it to them to support her as well. It became quite unclear, and the dispute heated up. After a while, I informed them I didn't want to talk to them anymore, so I hung up and blocked their numbers. Since then, I've been quite confused about my thoughts because of what my parents said, about how they would have supported me if I had in Claire's situation. I spoke with my wife about it, and she claims that they only said these things because I was not in her position and they were attempting to manipulate me. So I don't have to fall for any of that because they haven't even apologized to me yet, and yet expect me to help her out. My sister was never kind to me as a child, and everyone continually picked on me. I know my wife is correct, yet I have a nagging feeling of guilt. I'm not sure. I simply feel uneasy about everything. Am I the idiot for not hiring my sister after she lost her corporate job? Update 1. Thank you very much for responding to my post. It's been a while since I spoke with my folks, and I know what I did wasn't such a huge thing. To be honest, it's unlikely that my sister will never find work again. It's just that I don't want to work with her. I mentioned that I had discussed it with my wife, and the two of us had chosen to remain with our decision. But that doesn't set well with my parents. They've been making it sound like I've always been envious of my sister and was excited about the opportunity to do this to my family. I don't even understand why they're taking this so seriously, given that they've been contacting every single relative we have about it. It's not like these relatives are just talking to them and bringing it up in conversation. They go out of their way to text them and tell them all about me. It's ludicrous how they're acting, and I believe it's a call for attention, but I won't give it to them. They have been blocked, and no matter what they do, I will not unblock them or engage with them about it. Some relatives who tried to contact me even sent me screenshots. I answered to them by explaining the full incident. It's not like they didn't already know. For the past 5 years, my parents and I have run into each other at family gatherings but never spoken, so most people were aware of our strained relationship. But this is going too far, directly involving relatives and making me seem awful. Anyway, after I cleared things with several of my relatives, the majority of them urged me not to worry about my parents. They were not going to turn against me because they knew what had happened in the past. They understand that my parents are overreacting right now. That's what I'm happy about right now. Honestly, my wife is pregnant, so I don't think I have time to worry about these things right now. I had planned to make the announcement in a couple of weeks, but I guess I'll do it sooner, just so my folks will get the message and quit bothering me. I think it's a nice concept, but we're not sure if it will work because my parents are quite callous. They might even try to disturb us despite knowing my wife is pregnant. I would not put it past them. Update 2. Hello. So my wife and I announced the pregnancy on social media a few days ago. It's been roughly 10 days since I last spoke with my parents. Most of my relatives congratulated me, but then I received an email from an unknown sender claiming that my child will suffer as a result of my actions toward my family. I immediately recognized my parents. It had to be. Because no one else would even think of uttering something so heinous. My baby hasn't even been born yet, and they're already wishing us ill because I refused to help my sister. It's not like Claire had sought me directly for assistance, in which case I may have considered things. My parents, however, wanted me to offer her a job. Anyway, that's not the point. Even if I had done something truly awful, I do not believe they would have the right to say such things. I didn't inform my wife about the email since I didn't want to upset her. Even though she is still in the early stages of her pregnancy, reading stuff like these is really disappointing. I decided to deal with this on my own. I went over to my parents' place to speak with them in person. I didn't want to unblock them, so visiting them was the only option to communicate. But they refused to even open the door to let me in. Most likely because they knew what they had done was wrong. So I just spoke to them from outside their house, and I completely lost my patience. I raged at them, telling them that they had no right to say such things, especially given how they had treated me during my childhood and for the previous 5 years. as if I wasn't even a member of the family. They wanted a piece of my achievement and wanted to share it with my sister. Even if they had never compelled Claire to do such things when I was struggling. To be honest, they had not even supported me when I was struggling, so they did not deserve to communicate with me at this point. I informed them that whatever they were doing was ineffective since it was further isolating me from them. I also stated that I never wanted to speak with them again, and even if they apologized, I would not forgive them in the future. So they could say goodbye to any assistance from me when they retired, and they would never get to meet their grandchild either. After saying that, I left and returned home. And I'm really relieved right now. I'd been holding these things back for a long time, ever since they began bothering me. But it was about time that I responded appropriately. I have not yet informed my wife about this interaction because I do not want to disturb her. I don't think I will, at least until the pregnancy is over. Update 3. Hi. After I spoke with my parents in person last week, they decided to rest for a time and do nothing. I also had a pregnancy announcement party at my place for certain family and close friends. I anticipated my folks to do something that day, but they didn't bother. So I assumed they had finally moved on from this entire experience, and I was attempting to do the same. But then, this morning, Claire called me when I was at work. That was weird because she had ceased speaking with me 5 years ago, and I had no idea what she wanted. For a brief moment, I considered that she may approach me in the same way that my parents did and demand that I give her a job, forcing me to repeat the entire scenario, so I ignored her initial call. But then she contacted me a couple more times and messaged me, stating it was an urgent matter and she wanted to speak with me. She assured me that I would not need to worry because she would not expect anything from me. She explained that she simply wanted to share something that had been bothering her for some time. So I opted to answer the phone, and we talked today. She explained that she had been despondent for several weeks and had not spoken to anyone, disregarding all texts and emails she had received, including those from relatives. It wasn't until a few days ago that she read those messages and understood that everyone was talking about how unfair it was for our parents to expect me to provide her a job, especially when they had never treated me properly. Claire was perplexed because she had been speaking with our parents on a daily basis for the past few weeks, but they had not said anything about such family events. She had talked with them after reading those messages and inquired if they had done anything of the such, but they flatly refused, claiming they had no idea what was being alluded to. She suspected they were lying to her, so she called me instead to find out the truth. She mentioned that she had spoken with our parents about her work predicament and how distraught she was. She'd never asked for my help. So she couldn't understand why they'd enlisted me, and then tried to force me to contact her and offer her a job when she hadn't asked for it. After some deliberation, I decided to tell her the truth, because I believed she deserved to know what our parents had been up to behind her back. I gave her the entire thing that they had told me. I explained that once they told me about her position, they told me that I needed to get her a job and help my family since she was not in a good place right now, and they didn't want her to suffer. I informed her that while their initial aim was to really aid and support her in getting her life back on track, it gradually degenerated into harassing me, which I was not okay with. I told Claire that I was very sad about her employment because I knew how important it was to her and how much work she had put in. It couldn't have been easy being laid off like that. But truthfully, she knew we never got along and wouldn't function well together, which is why I denied our parents' request. Claire seems to comprehend. She informed me that she was not interested in working with me. She did not intend it offensively, but she was simply not in the appropriate frame of mind to work with anyone right now, so she was taking a break on deliberately. Our parents had given the impression that she had no proposals worth considering, but she did. She was only holding out because she wanted to rest. It was her personal choice. She wasn't upset, but she made the decision to not work for a while on her own. She was frustrated, so she vented to me for a while, and I let her. Even though we weren't on the greatest of terms anymore, I believed she needed it. After we had a complete chat about it, she told me that she was really upset about what our parents had done to her because it made her appear desperate and gave people the wrong impression, as if she was attempting to persuade our parents to compel me to hire her. She told me she was going to talk to them about it, and she apologized for everything I had been through. I thought it was quite mature of her, and I honestly felt like she had matured a lot over the last 5 years, especially after being laid off. I suppose she understood that nothing is permanent, and that she shouldn't be so haughty. Perhaps that was a lesson in disguise. Anyway, we weren't able to make things right, but we did have a decent conversation, which I think is enough for me. Update 4. Claire and I chatted by phone a few days earlier. After our chat, she stated that she would speak with our parents and confront them about what they had done. She did this, and it did not go well. Our parents were defensive, claiming that they were only trying to help her since they didn't think her decision to take some time for herself was a good one. They insisted that she resume her search for a better career immediately. They ended up in a massive quarrel because Claire accused them of trying to control her life from the start and never allowing her to make her own decisions, even as an adult. Of course, my folks were upset about it. They began listing all of the things they had done for her, which were the typical things parents do for their children. I'm not sure why they always feel it's appropriate to talk about it as if it were a favor. It wasn't a favor, they had to do it regardless. The fight escalated to the point where Claire no longer speaks to them. And who do they blame for all of this? Yes, they're blaming me again. I just don't get how I can become the scapegoat for almost every problem they end up in. This time, no personal confrontations occurred. Instead, they just decided to create a Facebook post about it. Lucky for me, all of our relatives rushed to my aid and called my parents out on their stupidity. They reminded them that they had been bad parents, not just to me, but also to Claire in some ways, because they continued to attempt to control and push her, especially when she was already going through a difficult time. They should have been there for her morally and emotionally, encouraging her. Instead, they were putting her down even more and portraying her as the evil guy. After receiving several comments from relatives, my parents decided to erase the post and block everyone in the family. To summarize, pretty much everyone has ostracized them now, which I am really glad about. Claire has apologized for mistreating me in the past, and we want to work on improving our relationship in the future. But for now, my wife is the most important thing in my life, and I am very happy to be a father.